Testing one, two, testing. Okay. All right, everybody, and welcome back to Cool Beans Hot Stuff. Today is Film Buff Fridays, and it's an awesome Film Buff Fridays. It's all rainy here where I'm at in Nashville, rainy and cloudy and overcast and all dark and shit. It's a perfect day to sit inside and just talk about movies. I love these kinds of days. They're great movie talking days. I like Fridays anyways. I don't give a shit if it's cold and muggy outside or ridiculously hot and sunny. It's a good day to talk about movies. Doesn't matter what the fucking weather's doing. So today we're going to talk about movies today. And if you're watching this live, I imagine you've seen the title, so you kind of have a general idea. We're talking about structuralist film theory. And same thing if you see this on YouTube. If you see this on YouTube, you clicked on it because you saw the title. You're interested in what the fuck structuralist film theory is. So that's what we're talking about today. Structuralist film theory. This is part two in my like three-part basic film theory stream a doodles. I don't really know what I'm going to call them, but that's it's something like that, right? Think of something catchier, you'll figure it out. But I wanted to explore film theory on this channel, obviously. Film Buff Fridays. We're going to do talk about movies, film, anything in that general area. I had a lot of good ideas for all the different kinds of things I want to do on Fridays. Everything from your basic like movie reviews and critiques to doing live first reactions to movies, like live critiquing and analysis of a movie, watch the movie with a live audience and critique the movie together. I thought that would be a fucking blast. And, conversations about movies. There's always all kinds of good, juicy conversations happening out on the interwebs about movie related topics. There's no shortage of people out there who are crying at the top of their lungs. No one understands my favorite movie. You just don't get it. Meet the illiteracy, douchebag. And so, yeah, there's tons of good conversations to have in that vein, right? So many people out there who feel like their favorite movie is misunderstood or that nobody else gets it and they're just smarter than everybody. And those are really fun conversations to have. So, wanted to have a bunch of those on this channel, all kinds of good stuff. But before I got to all the fun stuff, I figured, well, what I first ought to do is probably learn how to appropriately review and analyze movies, because I don't know how to do that, right? I did go to film school, believe that or not, and I got kicked out. And that's a whole nother story for another stream. But I got kicked out before I could learn a whole lot about anything regarding like film theory wise. Okay. So I thought it would be fun to do some film theory streams, especially since I'm first starting out. Nobody's watching me, anyways. I know you're watching Cutie Pie, so Cutie Pie's out there watching me live. My number one fan, everybody. Thank you, as always, for watching me hot stuff. If there's anybody else that's watching me, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the stream. If you're on YouTube and you find this, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the content. If you do, please like and subscribe. Always helps the channel out. But today, why we're hitting structuralist film theory is because I felt like it would be important to learn about film theory to get better at analyzing movies. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing. I'm learning about film theory, right? And you're coming along for the ride. We're learning together. Okay. I do the research in my own time. I collect what I think are the easiest to understand and most important and cohesive web pages, videos that I find regarding the subject. I put them all together and run through them with you and kind of explain it to myself, explain it to you, so that by the end of the video, we both hopefully have a really good understanding of whatever it is I'm talking about, in this case, structuralist film theory. And if not, then at least I don't feel like I'm a fucking idiot by myself. We're idiots together. We tried for 2 hours and we didn't get it together, right? And so that makes me feel better. So, wanted to do that. So starting with film theory, okay. If you really want to like start into film theory to kind of understand what we're doing, it would be advisable to go to my Film Buff Fridays playlist on my YouTube channel and check out past videos. Let me pull them up. Videos. Okay. You would want to look at the introduction to film analysis and or the how to analyze film video. So it's like my first two videos in the playlist, my first two Film Buff Fridays, and in both of those streams, I go over film theory, introduction to film theory. And when we go over that introduction to film theory, you'll realize, as I realized during the stream, there's a fuck ton of different film theories, a lot of them. And some of them are a little bit esoteric, and I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. I just mean it's not, you have to have a particular set of skills or a particular knowledge base in order to be really effective at those kinds of film theory, right? Think of film theory as just a way to analyze a movie through a particular, whatever interchangeable words you want, lens, perspective, philosophy. It's a lens, a perspective, or a philosophy through which you can analyze a film. And there's a lot of different viewpoints, another word for it, plenty of different lenses or viewpoints through which you can analyze a film. And some of those perspectives, philosophies, require a certain level of knowledge in some other topic or discipline. So, for example, historical film analysis you are analyzing the film through its historical context. So, let's say the film is about 1930s Germany and it's made in the 1980s Soviet Union, right? It's a 1980s Soviet Union film about 1930s Germany. You need to have a decent amount of historical knowledge in order to properly, I guess, accurately analyze the analyze the film's historical importance and meaning. You're going to need some level of knowledge about 1980s Soviet Union and 1930s Germany to know if the film is accurately portraying one, and if it isn't, why it would be. Why would the 1980s Soviet Union inaccurately portray 1930s Germany? You need to have an answer for things like that, right? And you don't need to. There's not like the film theory police that are going to come in and shut you down if practicing film theory without a license. It's not, that's not a thing. People will definitely jump up your ass on the internet if you put your opinion out there and it's completely and utterly wrong. But that's the internet. That's what's supposed to happen. People jump up your ass on the internet just for being, you can go on Reddit right now and say 2 + 2 = 4. And somebody's going to jump down your fucking throat like, it equals 5. Actually, that's a meme for a reason, right? Because, that's Reddit. That's the internet. That's what people do. So you can even be right about something and people are going to still jump down your throat. But it does behoove you. It would behoove you to know a lot about the historical context, right? Have some level of knowledge about those historical time periods in order to accurately analyze this film through a historical film theory lens, right? Same thing with feminist film theory, queer film theory, Marxist film theory. You're going to want to have some decent level of understanding about feminism, about critical queer theory, and about Marxism before you go out and analyze movies through that particular lens. And if you don't know shit about those things, the chances you're going to get it correct is probably kind of slim to none. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So before, and I'm not even sure if I'll deep dive into a lot of those, because I myself don't have a lot of practice, a lot of knowledge about like historical periods in time. So I don't know if I'm ever going to like do a video about historical film theory, right? I don't know. I know very little about, say, Marxism. I got the basics down, but that's about it. Not enough. I had a cough. Not enough to go out and do Marxist film theory video. Yeah. Or at least to do it good and accurately, right? So if that's the case, I'm probably going to stay away from some of those, at least for the time being. And instead, I just wanted to go through the basic film theories because it's important to understand these most basic film theories. The easier to get ones, the ones that don't require a certain level of knowledge in another field, seem to be the easiest to grasp. And at least you can grasp them without having to learn a whole nother subject matter, right? So it makes sense. There's logic. There's a method to my madness here. So I picked what AI mostly, and a lot of other websites, and then a lot of people on Reddit told me were the 3 best film theories to start with for at least understanding film theory. Because if you deep dive into any one of those other more esoteric versions of film theory, say feminist film theory, whatever, you're going to need to know these other film theories first. It would behoove you to know these others first, okay? It would be because you're going to take these basic film theories and then apply what you learn from them to feminist film theory, and then apply what you know about like feminism to that. And that's the lens through which you're going to analyze this movie if you're going to do it through a feminist film theory lens. Yeah. So we're going to start with the basics, and then I'm going to learn them. You can hop in here, check out this video, watch the live streams, learn with me as I'm learning. and hopefully have a decent enough, just basic understanding of these things that if you want to go out there and learn more, if going out there and learning about queer film theory or historical or cultural film theory is another one. Cultural, where you're analyzing a movie through the cultural context, what culture made the movie and what culture is this movie about, how accurate is it to the time, why, how would that influence how the different types of camera work that they're using or color palettes, all of that. If you want to deep dive into that, then you can do that. If you have the expertise to do that, then you can do that. But at least you have a good base understanding of what a lot of people on the interwebs say are the three that are at least three film theories that are at least the easiest to start, right? So that's what I'm doing today. I'm giving you number 2 of the 3 easiest film theories to grasp, understand, most important basic ones. Not necessarily most important, but some of the most important. And those were auteur theory, which that video is already on my YouTube channel. So you can go hit that up in my Film Buff playlist, right? Film Buff Fridays playlist. Today is going to be structuralist film theory, which is the second one. And then next month, we'll cover formalist film theory, right? And so once I have all 3 of those done, right, the 3 most basic big dogs of film theory, then I'm going to go into doing some of the more entertaining and funner stuff on this channel, having conversations about movies. Ooh, I thought it'd be cool to do bios on specific actors, filmmakers, writers, things like that. I have one day a month too where I deep dive into narrative, specific aspects of narration of a narrative, storytelling, like plot, characters, do a 2-hour deep dive on plot, 2-hour deep dive on characters. I've already done one Friday about plot and it was absolutely horrible, so you're not going to find it on any of my playlists. It's gone. I took it, banished it from the internet because it was such a shitty stream. Didn't prepare very well. Today I prepared though. I got everything set up to where I think we'll have a pretty easy stream. It's going to be at least easy to understand what the fuck is going on and why I'm hopping from one specific aspect of this subject to another. Yeah. So, and that's important because some of the stuff can get a little, right? Like, especially if it's your first time really learning about any of this shit, which it is for me, right? Structuralist film theory is not something that, they exactly taught me in high school. I don't know about you, but I didn't, like I said, I went to film school and then got kicked out before they could ever teach me what the fuck structuralist film theory was. So we're going to learn about it today. And unlike this stream today, my plot stream was pretty horrible. It was horribly put together, didn't do a lot of research beforehand, and kind of shit the bed on that one. So I'll be redoing that one here in a couple months. And so stuff like that. And then at some point it would be fun to do like top 10 lists. Obviously your basic YouTube stuff, that shit will be a lot of fun to do, but doing it live, it would be a blast. But before we get to that, I just had this hump to get over where I'm like, well, I got to learn about film theory. So I might as well do that live. And they might not get a lot of hits. Not a lot of people might not be interested. They're going to be like, who the fuck cares about your fucking film theory? But people who do care, they have this video out there and it's a way for them to learn along with me, right? So if you're in this learning what structuralist film theory is, you aren't like, oh my God, like I feel retarded. Like, well, no, you don't have to feel retarded. Well, you can feel retarded with me. We're both retarded. We both don't know shit about this, right? So we're learning together, right? That's the whole point of these film theory streams. So introduction, all that being said, let's go ahead and jump dive. I was trying to say the same 2 different words at once. Let's deep dive into structuralist film theory. Okay, so before we learn what structuralist film theory is, I felt like it would be a good idea to know what structuralism is, because structuralism comes about in the world before structuralist film theory. Okay, so you kind of want to learn, right? You got to learn to crawl before you walk, sort of thing, right? So let's just understand what structuralism is. Structuralism is a school of thought in the field of linguistics. Okay, structuralism in linguistics is any one of several schools of 20th century linguistics committed to the structuralist principle. Okay, now this is the structuralist principle that a language is a self-contained relational structure, the elements of which derive their existence and their value from their distribution and oppositions in text or discourse. Now, I would repeat that, but I don't think it's going to help me or you understand it any better. Did you get that? I hope you understood that, because I sure as fuck didn't, right? I read that last night when I was, I've been doing research on this for the last month, getting what I thought were some of the best or most, at least the most concrete evidence, best web pages I could find that helped explain the topic in a rational order. And I always read that. And now that I've read through all these web pages and I have a good idea of what structuralism is, I read that and I'm just like, That helps nobody. Like, structuralist principle that a language is a self-contained relational structure, the elements of which derive their existence and their value from the distribution and opposition in texts or discourse. So, if you don't understand what the fuck that's saying, that's okay. Totally cool, bro. I'm gonna help you out. We got this. We're gonna figure this out. Okay. So, this principle was first stated clearly in linguistics by a Swiss scholar named Ferdinand de Saussure. I never learned how to say his name, and I'm not going to because we're probably never going to talk about him again. We're going to say Fergie. We're going to call him Fergie, like the girl from what was it, Black Eyed Peas. This guy's name is Fergie now. So, in the U.S., the term structuralism or structural linguistics has had much the same sense as it has in Europe. Nowadays, however, it is commonly used in a narrower sense to refer to the so-called post-Bloomfieldian school of language analysis that follows the methods of another guy named Leonard Bloomfield, easier to say name, developed after 1930. Phonology and morphology. Phonology is the study of sounds that you make when you're saying words, like the actual like letters, consonants. Phonology is the study of that. Morphology is the study of word structure, are the primary fields of interest for linguistics, specifically the post-Bloomfieldian school of linguistics, which tend to center around structuralism. So, where does structuralism come from? We're going to need to know that too, and that is semiotics. I understand you probably heard that definition. And you're like, oh, fuck, I'm already lost in the sauce. This dude's been talking for 16 fucking minutes, and I already don't know what the fuck he's talking about. That's fine. That's cool. We're going to get there. Slowly, bit by bit. We're going to crawl before we walk. Semiotics. We're going to learn what that is. Semiotics is easier. It's just the study of signs. Semiotics, the study of signs and sign-using behavior. It was defined by its founders, the Swiss linguistics, Fergie, as the study of the life of signs within society. Although the word was used in the sense in the 17th century by English philosopher John Locke, the idea of semiotics as an interdisciplinary field of study emerged only in the late 19th and early 20th centuries with the independent work of Fergie and another American philosopher, Charles Sanders Peirce. So we don't need to really, I guess we could read this. This was important. So Peirce's idea, okay, he was one of the people who helped start semiotics. Semiotics is the study of signs. His work in the field is anchored in pragmatism and logic. He defined a sign as something which stands to somebody for something. And one of his major contributions to the field of semiotics was the categorization of signs into three main types. So when we're talking about signs, we're talking about one, there's a kind of sign called an icon, which resembles its referent, such as a road sign that shows falling rocks. The road sign is resembling the falling rocks, so like it's saying, oh, there's falling rocks in this bitch. Two, a sign can be an index, which is associated with its referent, as smoke is a sign of fire. So when you see smoke, that is a sign that there is fire around there, over there, right? One is associated with the other. And three, a symbol, which is related to its referent only by convention. So like words, for example, okay, the word itself, word, means a certain thing. That would be a symbol. The word is a symbol for what that word means, right? I shouldn't have chosen the word. That made that more complicated than it needed to be. So in any case, yeah, semiotics is the study of signs and sign behavior, sign language, would be a part of that. But structuralism is the study in linguistics of language as a structure, a relational structure. Okay. Still, I understand this is like, I have no idea. Here's where we kind of want to dive into this so you understand. So what's his name? Fergie treated language as a sign system, right? So it would be a part of semiotics. Any sign system is going to be studied in semiotics, and his work in linguistics supplied the concepts and methods that semioticians applied to sign systems other than language. One such basic semiotic concept, we don't need to understand that, I suppose. Fergie also distinguished parole or actual individual utterances from lang, the underlying system of conventions that make such an utterance understandable. It is the underlying lang that most interests semiotics. So it's the meaning of the sounds you're making, how to burp. This interest in this structure behind the use of particular signs linked semiotics with the methods of structuralism, which is why we need to learn about them both, which sought to analyze such relationships. Fergie's theories were thus also considered fundamental to structuralism and to post-structuralism, which we don't need to dive into that. So I do want to bring up structuralism again. Structuralism didn't just appear in linguistics, it also initially appeared in anthropology. So, structuralism in cultural anthropology is the school of thought developed by the French anthropologist Claude Levi Strauss, in which cultures viewed as systems are analyzed in terms of their structural relations among their elements. So, I gave you that because we're not going to be learning about no anthropology up in this bitch. I'm not interested in that. Hopefully, you didn't click on this video and want to learn about anthropology because I'm not going to give it to you. But I give you that definition so you can understand. Structuralism in linguistics, structuralism in anthropology. Hopefully, you see the commonalities. They are both studies about a system. One views language as a system, the other views cultures as a system, and both are the study of the structural relations within those systems. Okay, what are the structures of those systems of language and the culture, and how do they relate to one another? Yeah, okay, so still, it seems very out there, right? Ambiguous. You're still like, okay, that's great. You're saying words, but what the fuck do those words mean, right? This is a lesson in semiotics, right? When you say this structuralism in anthropology views culture as a system and analyzes the structural relations in that system. You know, you're saying a bunch of words, but what the fuck do those words mean? They don't mean anything. You know, it is tough. I get it. It is definitely. I read this and I was like I don't know. I need to like smoke some weed and like just stare at this sentence for several minutes until it finally clicks or something like that, right? But it's breaking any one individual thing. It can be language, it can be anthropology, or in our case, movies. That's why I'm teaching you this, because this is structuralism in film. It's the same concept. You can break film down into a system. And within that system, like a actual single cohesive movie, within that movie, there are systems, there are structures in the movie that relate to each other. So we need to know what are those structures and how do they play with each other when it comes to movies and such, right? So that's kind of what we're going to be learning today. I'm going to be taking structuralism in film and using it to break film down into a system and give you an idea of what those structures are within that system and how they relate to each other. So you're aware of them, you're aware of that relation, and you're aware of how you can view film as a system. Okay, and then you have structuralism in a nutshell. Oof, I think I got it. I think I explained that really well. I practiced like 5 times last night, which is exactly like 5 times more than I usually practice this shit before I do a live stream. Okay, so to help further burn this idea of what structuralism is, there is a nice little video here. I got it by the Living Philosophy, about 200 subscribers. I'm gonna subscribe because this is a good channel. Give it a like. We're gonna hop over here to the YouTube screen, and you guys can. We together are gonna watch not this entire person's video because it's 13 minutes on just structuralism, where it comes from. Again, linguistics and anthropology. We're just gonna watch about the first 4.5 minutes is what we're gonna watch, right? And he's gonna give us a quick rundown of where structuralists come from, why it came about, and I'm gonna pop in and add extra context if I have any extra context to add. If not, then I'm just going to enjoy the video with you. So let's sit back, get some popcorn, check it out.
Structuralism was a school of philosophy that was at the forefront of the continental philosophical tradition for a few short years in the.
This may be the last ad you ever see. Because with the free ad block extension from
my computer
in the 1960s. This time at
the last thing you need when you're trying to understand such heady and thick and esoteric forms of knowledge, right? You're trying to understand a discipline that's this fucking thick with bullshit, is a fucking ad popping up to sell you a fucking ad blocker, right? Like, if you never want to see me again, buy this. It's like, bitch, no and no. Check it out.
Cutting edge, although brief, was critical. It marked a turning point, a bridge from the existentialism that had dominated the continental tradition since the Second World War into a new intellectual landscape that has often been captured under the labels post-structuralism and postmodernism.
Okay, structuralism, just to briefly sum up what he said there, because little ad bitch got in the way, popped her damn head into this. So, not semiotics, excuse me. Structuralism is just a philosophy, a school of thought that popped into the world and served as a connection between two different philosophies. Philosophies kind of represent the eras in which they were invented, the school of thought for that era. It connects what came before it, which was existentialism. That's a philosophy that was kind of the center of the philosophical world. It was like the baby of the philosophical world at its particular point in time. It connects that era of existentialist philosophy with the next era, which is the era that I believe we just have recently gotten out of, which is the era of post-structuralist or postmodernist philosophy, right? You've heard that term postmodernism plenty of times, right? Here, if I'm going to start ranting, I got to learn to rant on my rant channel. Otherwise, I can't clip my rants and make shorts out of them. And sometimes I say insightful shit on my rants. Sometimes I just say something stupid and look like an ass. But either one, they're very clippable and people like them on YouTube. So I need to go to this camera whenever it's time for me to rant, regardless what happens. I'm going to want a clip of it later. So structuralism just connects. It's just a school of philosophy that connects the school philosophy that came before it, existentialism, with the school of philosophy that came after it, postmodernism, which I still, you probably heard that term postmodernism quite a bit in our day and age, because that was, I believe, I think it's unclear, to be honest. I'm sure philosophers have different, people who study philosophy have different opinions on it. But I believe if we haven't gotten out of postmodernism, we are getting out of it right now into a new era of what I've seen called online. I don't know if it's the definitive name, but what I've seen people calling metamodernism. Okay, so we went from like the modern or contemporary age that had various schools of thought in it, including at the end there, existentialism and structuralism. That's flip-flopped us over to the age of postmodernism, which is now flip-flopping over into the age of meta-modernism. So, as far as I understand it, I could be wrong. I could be completely fucked, though, and have no idea what I'm talking about. That's also a possibility. So, let's go back to the YouTube screen. And so that's just what he's talking about here.
In this episode, we're going to be looking at what structuralism is, why it was so revolutionary, and why it was so quickly outgrown. Structuralism can't be understood without reference to the work of Ferdinand de Saussure.
Yeah, see, that's why I didn't learn his fucking name, because it's that right there. Ferdinand de Saussure, blah, blah, blah. We're going to call him Fergie. He looks like a Fergie, right?
Previous episode on the channel, we looked at Saussure's revolutionary reorientation of linguistics with semiology, or as it's now known, semiotics. This work of Saussure made him the retroactive father of the structuralist tradition. In the language of Thomas Kuhn, Saussure birthed the paradigm within which structuralism worked, and it was an exemplar of what a structural analysis should look like. In his posthumously published Course on General Linguistics, Saussure made a number of important distinctions that laid the groundwork for this tradition.
So, just to clarify what he said there, this guy's the big dog. Big dog with his big dog mustache. That's all he's saying. He's saying this guy was a guy who initially brought about structuralist and served as the example of how structuralist philosophy is practiced, the most effective way, how you would think as a structuralist philosopher. Yeah, so that's what he did. And notice he brought up semiotics. Structuralist came about through semiotics, which is why I not only told you what semiotics is, but we're going to do even more explaining into that later into the stream.
That laid the groundwork for this tradition. The most important idea for the purposes of our general overview of structuralism is Saussure's distinction between parole and langue. These are two different words for language that have slightly different meanings for the Swiss linguist. Parole is the 1,000,001 uses of language as it is used everywhere, every day. It's language in motion. But underneath this constantly changing surface of language, there is the langue, the structure of the language which dictates the workings of parole.
So, parole is how language is used. What the... Let me pop over here. Okay. Parole is how language is used, why it is used, why you use certain words, the way you use words. Langue is the actual meaning behind the let's go back. Well, let me pop it up again.
Constantly changing surface of language.
Oh,
There is
thank
the
you,
long,
cutie. I
the
appreciate
structure of the
that.
language which
You're
dictates
so
the working.
sweet. You're so sweet, such a cutie pie too. We're good together. I'm super handsome and you're super cute. So it is just the system of language. It is the underlying meaning behind the words that you're saying. Parole is how you use the words that you're saying. Lang is why you're making, and not even words. It can go down to the sounds that you're making, right? If you're going in and what is it? Phonology is the actual sound that you're making. Why A is A. And what is the meaning behind that would be long, and parole would be how you use it, right? Would verse like saying a versus ah. Yeah. Okay.
Means of parole.
Oh, you need the video back. I know I'm handsome, but you're gonna want the video. Here we go.
The relationship between long and parole is much like that between the rules of chess and a particular game of chess. The rules provide a structure that give meaning and order to the individual moves in a particular game of chess.
That would be long. He's talking about the rules of a game of chess. Yeah.
In the same way, the long provides the structure of language within which our day-to-day interactions occur and derive their meaning. This distinction between...
So, you just to continue piggybacking off of his metaphor, long would be like the rules in a game of chess that dictate how the pieces can move, and thus it would be like the rules of language, why you say specific sounds and organize them into specific words.
Between the empirical surface of language and the hidden structure of it was to prove a major inspiration for the French philosophers of the 1960s and 70s. With that groundwork in place then, let's talk about what structuralism is. In the broadest sense, structuralism is a way of perceiving the human world in terms of structures. This is already familiar to us from looking...
Spilt a little bit of my coffee. I was too excited to hear myself talk. Okay. That's important. Structuralism is just seeing the world through a series of structures. That's a much better definition than what they gave us on Britannica. That Britannica definition always fucks me up. It's so wordy, and so many of those words are big words, and it's like, ugh, God, that's really difficult to understand. But this one right here, structuralism is a way of perceiving the human world in terms of structures. And when given to you like that, it's like, you can apply structuralism to any aspect of the world. It's just analyzing that particular part of a world through structures. Like you can take any part of your daily life and analyze it through a structuralist view. It's just analyzing it to understand what are the underlying structures. And we'll get into defining that concept of structures, particularly in film. Yeah. But that's all it's doing. It's what are the underlying structures behind this thing I'm analyzing? You know, what are the beams? How are the wooden beams set up in the walls of my house, right? What is the the ground level? I'm forgetting the term, damn it. Can't believe I'm forgetting the term. I used to actually put in sub-basements, foundations. What is the foundation of my house made out of? Okay, these would be structures. You're analyzing the structure of whatever this topic is. Yeah, okay. I'm going to quit talking. Let's keep going.
Human world in terms of structures. This is already familiar to us from looking at the physical world. The natural world, whether it's a supernova, a quark, or a gene, are individual instances that operate by underlying rules. Each supernova, quark, and gene are different. They are the parole of the natural world, but underpinning them is the hidden structure of physical laws that scientists have unriddled in the past few centuries. From Newton's laws to the work of Watson and Crick, humanity has been decoding the long of the natural world, the hidden set of structures that makes the physical world predictable and enables the progression of science.
I think, for me, a good way of understanding this is when people say structures, a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times they're talking about rules. You know, if we're talking about the structure, if you're analyzing, going back to like chess, you're analyzing a chess game, you need to be able to understand what the rules of chess are in order to do so. Those rules, what dictates how those pieces can move, is the long or that structuralism. The process of analyzing a game of chess using its rules as a backdrop is structuralism.
Structuralism is the transposition of this physical scientific worldview onto the human world. At its core, structuralism is the belief that this human world is subject to such a long, and that we can discern these structures. Saussure was the pin-up philosopher of the Structuralists. His analysis of language gave Structuralists the confidence and the example, in Kuhnian language, the paradigmatic exemplar of how this work might be done. But Saussure wasn't the only inspiration for the Structuralists.
You know, his mustache is really growing on me. That's a nice mustache. I would like a mustache like that, you know, whether it's, and it isn't just because I see it in metal here, but that's a nice masculine mustache there, right? I need to grow me one of those. Cutie Pie, that's my next project. I'm going to grow me a big, thick caterpillar mustache like that. What do you think?
Much as the existentialists of the 40s and 50s cast their net back to 19th century thinkers like Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, and Dostoevsky, the Structuralists cast their net back not just to Saussure, but also to Sigmund Freud and Karl Marx. Marx's structuralist chops comes from his dialectical materialism, in which he argues that the underlying structures of society, the labour, class, and socio-economic conditions, determine all the higher activities. Thus, religion becomes opium for the masses, and philosophy, art, and politics are all surface reflections of the deeper underlying structure of material concerns. Freud was another legendary proto-structuralist because he undermined the myth of the free conscious agent that was at the backbone of the Western Judeo-Christian tradition since the story of Adam and Eve. Freud showed that who we are as individuals is determined much less by the surface of the mind, by the words and thoughts we consciously think about ourselves, than it is by the deep, hidden structures of the unconscious mind. But moving beyond Saussure and the proto-structuralists in the 1960s and 70s, the structuralists proper applied this type of analysis to fields as varied as psychology, anthropology, history.
When I heard this guy's voice, I definitely didn't picture that face. That he's kind of got a, you know, with these big ears, he's kind of got a monkey feel to him. His voice is very soothing though. I like his voice. I don't know what accent that is, but it's nice. Yeah, I didn't expect the hair either. That's like kind of looks like my little brother's hair a little bit, but blonder obviously. Yeah, you're not for the mustache, huh? Well, mustache but with a beard. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, without a beard, one or the other. Oh, you want the mustache without the beard? I don't know. I like the beard. It hides my tiny chin. So I'm gonna have to. Well, we'll think. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about this. We'll have a very serious heart to heart about my beard growing here after the stream. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't expect that guy to look like that either. That kind of blew my mind. I was like, whoa, he kind of looks like a monkey. But hey, he's very clearly smart. This dude seems like he really understands this shit. And you know, he's got his bookcase back here, so we all see how smart he is, and I believe him. Sounds like a smart guy. Wow, I'm getting a lot of the crackling today. Like I can hear it in my headphones. That was just a ridiculous amount of crackling right there. I don't know. There's good days and bad days, I guess. Anyways, so yeah, that was what he just went over right there was structuralism in regards to psychology, how Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud contributed their ideas to, or how their ideas influenced the creation of structuralism. So, sorry, I had a cough.
And sociology.
Okay, just wanted to let him finish that tiny little bit there. That's as far as we're going to watch into this.
Well, Grammarly.
That's as far as we're going to watch into this particular video, because now he's going to dive into the different types of different people within structuralism and the failures of the structuralist philosophy. If you're really interested in philosophy and you like this kind of stuff, this guy is a really good channel. The Living Philosophy, it's called, right here. Check him out. Give him a like and subscribe and follow him. He's really does understand this stuff and does a much better job of explaining it than Britannica. So give this guy credit where credit's due. This is a very good channel for philosophy. And I've always considered adding some philosophy orientated. I guess this this isn't a philosophy orientated stream. It kind of is, but I would always think of doing a philosophy based stream here or there, so I'm going to be watching a lot of his videos, but he did a good job of explaining structuralism. Let's pop back over Meow. So yeah, that's more or less what structuralism is. I think it's much easier to understand the way this guy put it. Really helps you out. Structuralism is just basically the process of attempting to understand the underlying structures of any one particular aspect of our world. You can apply structuralism to anything. It's just understanding what are those in an easier way. It's not completely accurate, but an easier way to understand the underlying rules of whatever your discipline is that you're trying to apply structuralism to. Yeah. So much easier to understand because from this next step is okay, how do we apply structuralism to film? What is the rules that we need to be looking for in film? And that brings us to our next webpage here by beverlyboy.com. I go to this website a lot. They have some good content here. What is structuralism in film, right? That's exactly what we need to answer, right? So structuralism in film represents a theory, otherwise known as structuralist film theory, which effectively states that films convey meanings through the use of various codes, symbols, or conventions that resemble language structure. Okay, so another way to say this, so to tie it into what we just learned, is states that films convey meanings through rules and relationships that resemble a structure, any kind of structure, in this case, a language structure. But film has a structure, and it is the rules in that structure that convey certain meanings in the film that you're watching. And in this case, some of those, I don't know if you caught it, some examples of those rules or structures are various codes, symbols, or conventions, right? You notice that word symbols, like semiotics, yeah? The structuralist theory came about in the 1960s and 70s when we went through what is sometimes referenced as the linguistic turn in film studies. So you can kind of see why it was called that. They took structuralism, which was a philosophy primarily used in the field of linguistics and anthropology, and applied it to film. And linguistic turn in film studies rolls off the tongue much better than the anthropological turn in film studies. So I imagine that's also had some hand in it too. Many of the academic studies that focused on filmmaking and film structure were heavily centered around language and linguistics. Structuralism obviously came straight from linguistics, yeah. At this time, film explanations focused on the use of language as the explanatory basis. And in this case, they just mean systems within language, seeing where they apply to a film. More or less is what I kind of get from that, right? Structuralism took a scientific approach to film theory, essentially stating that all films had set structures, such as specific patterns or relationships, through which an audience can see or understand, allowing the film to be enjoyed. Basically, the structuralism and film theorists believe that the meaning behind films were the result of the interrelation of the film's underlying elements within the system or structures of the film. So it's basically, we're repeating ourselves. We're saying the same thing over. Film is created by a series of structures that are interrelational, these structures are made of relative codes, patterns, rules that relate to one another in a specific way. Okay. Hidden codes in plain sight. Because this is kind of going to be the next question we'll answer here in a little bit is what are these codes and rules that you speak of? Hidden codes in plain sight. Structuralists believe that films were able to convey meaning to audiences through the use of various structures or codes, which were understood by the audiences. In essence, the use of narrative, camera shots, or various other structural elements of a film, such as its lighting or its prop placement, are behind the meanings of the film that are conveyed to the audience when structuralism in film is the focus. And so, again, kind of a wordy answer, but this is why I think talking to people online, people who have done film theory classes, why they say structuralism is a good place to start. You are, by learning how to analyze a film from a structuralist point of view, you are attempting to understand all of the codes, rules, technical elements that can be used in a film, structural elements, they call them here, like camera shots, lighting, prop placement, or mise en scène. You are taking all these different aspects of a film, these structural elements, and you are learning how to analyze them and get meaning from them. Okay, what could they mean by the prop placement in this movie? What could this color in this particular scene, right? Think of color coding, right? What could this code? What could be the meaning behind using this color in this particular scene, right? And understanding that is very important when it comes to those other esoteric variations of film theory, right? For example, there's an aspect of film theory, of queer film theory, that states directors can communicate the bisexuality, or say the homosexuality or the transsexuality of a character using a specific set of colors in a particular scene. So the joke version of this, it's kind of told as like a tongue-in-cheek joke on Reddit. It still seems to piss a lot of people off, though, even though, it's just a joke. But at the end scene of the movie The Thing, John Carpenter lights the scene. The end scene of the movie The Thing has Childish and the characters of Childish and McGreedy, the sitting alone in the snow after they've maybe killed the Thing. And neither one of them trusts each other and knows if the other one is actually the Thing. And that scene is lit with, I forget the exact colors. It's purple and blue, light blue and dark purple, I think, something to that effect, or light purple and light blue, which the joke is those are the bisexual colors, right? So those are the colors of the bisexual flag, right? And so the running joke is John Carpenter is telling us one of them is bisexual, but who really is it? And so, obviously it's kind of playing off the idea of the actual movie that one of them is the Thing. Who is it? What he's really saying is one of these guys likes to suck pee-pees. Which one is it? And it's a joke, and it's just meant to be funny. Some people who love the movie The Thing, again, take it way too serious and are like, I don't call my movie gay, and it's kind of funny. Again, these are the kind of debates that eventually I want to do on this channel, because they are just really funny and hilarious, and they're all in good fun. You don't have to take it that seriously, bro. It's just people having fun. But that would be an example of color coding in film through the lens of queer theory, right? So there you go. Again, this is a joke variation of this. I don't think queer film theorists actually believe that John Carpenter was saying one of these two men is bisexual, but there are movies where the directors are doing that, okay? And so that's what they're analyzing for. So you need to be able to analyze colors and know that colors do represent something in film. Sometimes, maybe not all the time, but you need to understand that and know how to analyze that before you can apply it to, any Marxist theory or anything else. Yeah. Okay. So that's why learning structuralist film theory is important to learning all other aspects of film theory. Okay. So there's my rant. There it is. Oh, I forgot to put on my rant screen. That's okay. I can still cut that out. I still look good, even if I was little tiny head in the corner. My tiny head looked good. Okay, structuralist theorists believed that structuralism in film was similar to the use of languages in everyday conversations, and that the ways that language is used to convey meaning to one another through the use of words, sentences, and grammar, the underlying structural elements of language. We're kind of just repeating ourselves now at this point. Structuralist film theory. So what is structuralism in film? I think you just answered that in both of the last three paragraphs. So what is structuralism in film, and how does it further define film theory? Structuralism in film was an attractive focal point for many years and continues to make up the foundation or basis of many other forms of content. Structuralists analyze the logic of cultural products or practices and their influence in building a foundation upon which film theorists could study and make implications on films. So, structuralism, or the structure of specific film elements such as shots, lighting, or scene display, can have a unique impact on the audience's emotions or perceptions of what is seen on the screen. So that one is a more important sentence there, right? That's the idea. In structuralism, you're analyzing these aspects of a film through the perspective that these aspects of film, such as shot, lighting, scene display, etc., they have a meaning that is conveyed to you that helps create the emotional results of watching this movie. What your subjective perception of this movie is influenced by these structures within the movie. Okay. So yeah, that's how they take structuralism as a philosophy and apply it to film theory. This Beverly Boy Productions has a quick video on it that does a little bit of extra explanation. It's a little bit more of a quick dive. We're just going to watch it real quick. It's only 2 minutes, so I'm probably just going to watch it and then we'll hop back and jump into something else. But it's just, when you're learning the basics of something, it's a good idea to just hammer it into your fucking brain, which means go over it a couple times. So we're just going to go over everything we said with different words, really.
What is structuralism in film? Structuralism in film is a theory born in the 60s and 70s. It's a framework rooted in language and linguistics. Film theory suggests that movies convey meaning through codes, symbols and conventions, resembling the structure of language. Structuralism and film theory. By exploring patterns and relationships, structuralism in film theory enhances audience enjoyment through deeper comprehension and appreciation. Films have hidden codes like language, using storytelling, camera angles and lighting to convey deep meaning. How structuralism works. Structuralist examined cultural products' logic and impact.
This is Jess. She needs her money to work.
Man, I tell you, always trying to sell us shit. Get away. Oh,
Exploration.
there it is.
Certain elements in film, such as shots and lighting, impact the audience, and structuralism helps filmmakers manipulate them purposefully. Skilled filmmakers can use intentional shot combinations to create emotions, like showing a person, buffet, and person again to convey hunger. Importance of structuralism in film. Structuralism in film helps to create complex meanings. This is achieved without altering anything but the film structure. By demonstrating structural techniques, film theorists offer audiences rapid comprehension and insight into the filmmaking process. Film is
Good to know here. That's what, again, why we want to learn structuralism, why I was interested in learning film theory in the first place on this channel and doing a 2-hour live stream on it. You know, these aren't going to be popular videos on YouTube, man. People just aren't interested in film theory. They don't give a fuck, which is fine. You don't have to. This isn't something you need to understand to survive in the world, obviously, you know. But if you do want to have a channel analyzing film, it's good to be able to analyze, good to be able to understand these underlying structures of film, because it can potentially, according to a structuralist, it does help you better understand the meaning being conveyed by the film. Yeah.
a compilation of elements that, through structure, generates complex and conscious thoughts. Techniques such as lighting, sound, and camera movement captivate attention, conveying messages and highlighting film's power beyond visual imagery. Beverly Boy Productions expertly leverages these elements to craft stories. Join us to learn about film.
And there you have it. That was Beverly Boy Productions. Tinier YouTube channel. I've watched a couple of videos. Let's give them a good like here. Only got 7 likes. 1,000 people watched the video and only 7 likes. Lazy. Can't just hit the like button, son. Okay, so let's learn a little bit more about structuralism and film theory. We're going to just get a basic understanding of the origins of structuralism, which we kind of already touched on. Give us a little bit more about structuralism in film. Again, a lot of this is going to... Oh, wow, that is an interesting idea. That is entirely too late, but it's still a really good idea. It's a bummer I didn't think of that. Or you didn't say it beforehand. What the heck, cutie? Where were you at? You should have watched a movie prior to learning all these film theories and then rewatch it after learning everything to see how your perspective changed. Oh, wait a second. That's absolutely what I'm doing, right? Oh, hey, Sky Flu. What's going on? My headphones broke today because I feel like I've seen this one before. Cutie, didn't the another guy send me this message before? Yeah. This is the exact same message we got from that other guy. Well, whatever. Yes, I thought so. Okay, so it's a bot. We'll say, well, hello, Sky Flu, Mr. Bot. Sorry about your headphones and your naughty cat. Hope you enjoy the stream. I'm going to put that still because even if he is a bot, maybe he'll still follow, you know. I'm okay with the follow, even if it's from a bot. Anyways, cutie. Yeah, that's a great idea, actually, hot stuff. And you're absolutely fucking right. That I sh- well, you're right. That is a great idea. But I think I'm actually doing that, right? I've watched every movie I've ever watched. I've watched before I learned this stuff, right? You see what I'm saying? Oh, I'm on the other screen. There we go. I'm back. Hello. So, yeah, every movie I watched before I learned film theory, right? So if I rewatch any movie that I've already watched after learning all this, then I'm doing exactly what you're saying. So that's a good idea. It's a really good idea, but I think I'm actually already doing it. But yeah, you always come in with the good ideas. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the fun though. That you're right though. There's a lot of fun in that. Watching a movie, not knowing shit about any of this, and then rewatching the movie. Yeah, but you're right. I didn't do it on camera. No, for sure. For sure. I feel like this is your lead in to say you should have watched uh Fu Mong Fu Wong 2. Is this your way of convincing me that I should have watched Fu Wong 2 live on stream before learning all this? Yeah, Tu Wong Fu. It is, isn't it? I knew it. I knew it. I know you too well now. I knew it. I knew what sneaky shit you were up to. That was a good one. That was good. It was clever. You almost got me there too. Could have almost convinced me. Okay. All right. So, anyways, let's hop back into structuralism in film. Yeah, we kind of already went over that. Yeah, we didn't want to get into post-structuralism. Post-structuralism is its own thing, and wasn't interested in teaching you guys about that because it's already a lot just to understand structuralism. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So that's already a whole lot to understand. You really don't want to. Yeah, that's true too. I could do that too, Cutie Pie. Just watch it, videotape my reaction, and then rewatch it after doing it again for sure. That is true. I can do that. Well, now I can't because I'm already learning about these film theories. So late in the game. Late in the game. Here. So, okay. Anyways, let's go through the origins of structuralism. We're going to run really quickly through this because we've kind of already covered this, right? It was heavily influenced by the structuralist movement, the philosophy movement, which originated in linguistics and anthropology. We already know this because we're fucking smart and shit and you pay attention. One of the most significant figures in the movement was Fergie with the awesome mustache, who argued that language is a system of signs, each consisting of a signifier, a word or an image, and a signified, the concept that that word or image represents. That's an important concept to understand. You have the signifier, the word or the image, or in this case, it would be like the color, right? We talked about how colors represent certain things, the color and what it is signifying, what it represents. So the color represents, in the case of that, the thing, right? If you're analyzing, the joke, it's a joke, but the thing, the colors, purple and blue or whatever, represent bisexuality, right? So, yeah, that's exactly what that's important to understand. If you don't understand that, then it's a little bit more difficult. I mean, that's the basic concept of what you're doing with structuralism, right? You have to understand that there's a signifier and then something that the signifier is signifying, right? So that's an important concept that nobody else has put down, right? So good thing we jumped into this article. His ideas laid the foundation of semiotics, the study of signs and symbols, which became crucial to film analysis. Interesting. I actually, from what we've seen, I thought that was the opposite, that semiotics laid the foundation for structuralism. But you get confused about this stuff, it's confusing. It can be very confusing, right? So in any case, well, it doesn't really matter to us for our purposes. Another key influence was Claude Levi-Strauss. We already read about him, an anthropologist who applied structuralist ideas to the study of myths and cultural narratives. He suggested that myths share common structures across different cultures, revealing universal patterns in human thought. that is very much, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, the foundation for, oh, what was his, oh, shit balls. Now I forgot his name. What was that? Jonathan, Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell. So, yeah, in any case, that if you know anything about Joseph Campbell and his work on the hero's journey, and this is that's what the hero journey is. The hero's journey is a structure. It is a plot structure. Literally, it's in the word. It is a plot structure that is shared across different cultures through their mythology, right? So, if you know anything about plot structure, again, if you don't, that's cool. At the end of this month, I'm going to have a video on plot structure. I already made one, but it sucked. So this next one's going to be good. Any case, that's gonna, hopefully that helps you kind of understand what kind of structures we're talking about. In this case, plot is a structure in a movie, right? And Joseph Campbell took this idea by Claude Levi Strauss and applied it to myths, and then Levi Strauss, then Joseph Campbell took it another break further. So yeah, there you have it. These ideas soon found their way into film theory as scholars began to explore how films, like myths, rely on deep-seated structural conventions. Structuralism in film. So, structuralism film theory applies these linguistics and anthropological principles to cinema, treating films as systems of signs that communicate meaning through established structures like plot, right, or color. Rather than viewing a film as a unique artistic creation, structuralists theorists analyze how it conforms to or subverts underlying cinematic codes, like certain colors meaning certain things. Or, for example, does this movie use the hero's journey or the three-act structure? You know, that sort of thing, right? I'm in the chat right now. Give me a second. All right. It's kind of one of the fun things I wanted to do about doing it live. The reason I want to do these videos live, I say it at least once in every video, is to have people come in and sit and chat. You know, even if it's chatting through the actual chat and text, it's still fun to sit and talk with people, even if they may possibly end up being a bot. That too. So in any case, yeah, these include narrative structures. So hold on, let me back up a step. Rather than viewing a film as a unique artistic creation, structuralist theorists analyze how it conforms to or subverts underlying cinematic codes. These include narrative structures, genre conventions, editing techniques, and visual symbolism. By identifying recurring patterns such as binary oppositions, such as good and evil, civilization and wilderness, you're going to see that term binary opposites a lot later in the stream because that is a form of code or structure that is used heavily in film, taking two complete opposites of one another and use them to convey a message. Or archetypal character roles. Okay, now again, Joseph Campbell here. He didn't create, but illustrated archetypal characters used in mythology and storytelling. Structuralist critics uncover the universal frameworks that shape storytelling across different films and cultures. One of the most influential structuralists is Christian Metz. He extended Fergie's linguistics theories to cinema, arguing that films function as a language with their own grammar and syntax, and that would be the underlying structures, is all that he means for that. Back in chat again, give me a second. So this was Christian Metz now, says, like, you know, films have their own grammar and syntax, just like language does. He identified various cinematic signs, such as camera movements, montage techniques, mise en scène, which contribute to meaning in a structured way. For example, a close-up shot often signifies intimacy or emotional intensity. We learned this if you went over my introductions to shots video. I have that video up on my YouTube channel in the Film Buff playlist. We took 2 hours to understand camera shots and what types of meaning they can convey. So if you watch that video, you're actually already on your way to understanding some of the most basic elements of film. I have another video called The 8 Elements of Film. And in those, we go over the 8 elements that most film theorists usually analyze when looking at a film. And hence, those 8 elements are, in part, a big part of the structures that you would analyze from a structuralist point of view. Okay. So definitely go check out the 8 elements of film, 8 elements of film theory video on my YouTube channel. And after that, go check out my introduction to shots. And what is the other? I think I got one more. Hold on. Let me pop this up real quick for you. Deep dive into shots and deep dive into film type. Those are the two. We've covered 2 of the 8 elements that film theorists use to analyze a film. So those are the first 2, film type and shots. So deep dive into shots and deep dive into film type. Check those videos out on my YouTube channel, right? So he identified various cinematic signs. Okay, we already went over that. Through this systematic approach, structuralist film theory provides a deeper understanding of how meaning is constructed in cinema, making it a valuable tool for film analysis. Another significant figure in structuralist film theory is Peter Wolin, whose book Signs and Meaning in Cinema was instrumental in introducing semiotic film analysis to a broader audience. I don't know semiotic film analysis. I'm imagining it's just another way for them to say structural film theory. I don't know for sure, though, but I can't imagine that it means something all that different than what we're talking about. So Wolin built upon Met's idea, but also incorporated insights from Russian formalism and the work of Soviet filmmakers like Sergei Eisenstein. I love that name. Eisenstein. It's like Einstein on coke. Eisenstein. He argued that film should be understood as text composed of signs that function within structured systems of meaning. Okay, that's kind of, again, we're just rewording what we already know here. But just for the sake of really bringing it home, we really just want to bring it home and say this is what structuralism is about, right? Like I say, when you're learning something new, you really just want to take the basics of it and just smash it into your brain. Just mash it right in there like potatoes. Really just so you remember and understand, okay, this is this is what this is about. You don't have to wonder about it, or you don't forget it, right? So a useful website, I'm going to have to pop into that. Give me 1 second. That website, I've been using it this whole time, and now this little thing pops up that says, you need to give us money. And it's like, fuck you fuckers, right before the stream. Everybody wants money for everything. I mean, I understand why, but come on now. So let's see if I can get this to pop up again, because I was finagling it last night and I was able to. There it is. Okay, so we can run through it really quick before they try to sell me more shit. Okay, definition of structuralism. We already kind of went through that. A theoretical framework that analyzes cultural phenomenon, including film, by focusing on the underlying structures that shape the meaning and form. It emphasizes the relationships between elements within a system rather than the individual components, highlighting how narrative, language, and visual codes create meaning in films. Okay, 5 things to know. This is a really good website, despite of how much they always try to sell me Fiveable. Really, they're just trying to sell me a subscription to use their website, which it's like, okay, fine. I totally get it. But I'm also going to try to cheat it as much as I can. Yeah. Okay. Oof. Woo. I thought that was a thingy. So I got to move fast here, or else they're going to try to sell me shit. And eventually, one of these times, they're not going to let me reload it. Anyways, Fiveable, good website. I'll link this in the description so you guys can check it out and maybe print it off before they do this to you. But these 5 facts, or they're just kind of like 5, what's another good way to say this? 5 concepts, like the key concepts. So you understand this just a little bit better. The 5 key concepts of structuralist film theory, right? So number 1, structuralism emerged in the early 20th century as a response to individualistic theories, prioritizing systems and structures over isolated phenomenon. Again, really the important aspect of that is structuralism came out of the contemporary or modern movement of philosophy. Okay, it was like towards the end of that. It was the end of that. The end of that was structuralism, which gave way into post-structuralism, also known as postmodernism, right? Or at least that's what we know. They did it again. I only got through one of them, and these fuckers blocked me. I'm gonna keep doing this though. We're gonna get by it. Maybe. Maybe not. I might not have went fast enough. I talk way too much. I mean, that's kind of why I stream. Yeah, because I enjoy hearing myself talk. If I didn't, then I wouldn't stream. But I talk way too much, and I think it might have fucked me on this one. We can't read number 2, but we can read number 3 or 4 down here underneath it. So another key concept of structuralist film theory that you're going to want. And again, I'll link this in the description of the YouTube video so you can go look at it and hopefully see them for yourself, right? To help. It's good to write them down or print this page off so you have it, because these are core concepts of what structuralist film theory is, right? So number 3, one key aspect of structuralism is its reliance on binary opposites. Like I said, you're going to hear that word a lot today. To analyze conflicts and themes within films, revealing deeper cultural meanings, right? So, yeah, that's exactly, the binary oppositions is going to be one of those key systems or set of rules that will help you understand film a lot better. I love you, cutie pie. You're awesome. Okay, I still need to make you the mod of my stream. I don't know how to do that, but after this stream today, we're going to make you a mod of the stream, all right? We're going to put you in there so you have full control over this sort of thing, okay? Number 4, structuralists argue that meaning is not fixed, but rather generated through the interplay of various elements within the filmic structure. And so again, those elements are the rules, the patterns, the codes that you're going to see in a film that help, and that the meaning within this film comes from these structural elements and the way they relate to each other, right? The word interplay, the way that these elements interact with one another. Let's give it another try, see if these fuckers will let me in. They're rejecting me. So much rejection. Okay, well, fuck you guys then. I'm grabbing my ball and going home. So this is a really good breakdown. Like, I try not to use AI, Wikipedia, Reddit, Quora, any of those things when I'm doing these research streams and trying to learn stuff. In my spare time, I use them a lot. They're a good guide. You can get on Wikipedia, type in structuralist film theory, and then it'll give you a very good rundown and then usually if it's well written, it'll give you the links, and that's very helpful to at least start your journey with. If you're learning something new like structuralist film theory, it really helps with understanding where to go from there, right? You get your basic understanding, and then you can get some links to hop into to kind of dive into the actual stuff, I guess, what's the word that I'm looking for? More trustworthy sources, right? So it's a good place to start learning about something on Reddit, Wikipedia, what have you. That's beneficial. But you don't want to get all your understanding from there, right? And I try to avoid it. I use it for myself to get that base understanding, get those links, and then that's what I try to use for the stream. But there's times where it's like, God, dude, AI just did such a good job. You go through the links, and then you go back to the AI, and you're like, man, it's just all right there, nice and easy. So we're going to use AI here just to help you understand a more detailed breakdown of structuralism in film. This is what you can think of it as another 5 concepts, or really this would be like 5 of those structures that we're talking about within structuralist film theory. What are some of these structures? Because at this point, we know what structuralism is more or less as a philosophy, right? Okay, we're not going to be, dazzling any philosophy majors in chat, right? They're not going to be too impressed with what we know about structuralism as a philosophy, but we know enough that we can apply that philosophy to film, right? And so we have a good understanding. It's not in-depth understanding, but a good understanding of what structuralism is in film. We are just studying the underlying structures, rules, codes that make up a film to understand better what the film is trying to say, the message that it's attempting to convey. Okay. At this point, we kind of want to learn the next question to answer here. For me, anyway, is my logical way of going about this. The next question to answer is, what are those structures, those codes, those patterns that we need to be looking at to better understand the meaning inside of a film, right? So this is a good place to start, and that's what we're going to dive into. We're going to take a look at this, and I'm going to hop in between this and some of those. I got a plenty of good videos here about those specific structures to help us understand what those things are that we need to be analyzing from a structuralist viewpoint in order to do what structuralists are doing, right? In order to apply this theory in real life to an actual movie, right? So, detailed breakdown of structuralism. First point here, structural analysis. Structuralists examine films by breaking them down into constituent parts. That's the structures, the underlying elements, narrative elements like plot structure, camera techniques, mise en scène, and analyzing how these parts relate to each other. Again, it's the systems within a particular, the structures within a particular system and the way those structures relate to each other. This approach focuses on the rules and structures. Again, we're continuously repeating this language, right? You know, there's a reason for that. It might be tedious at first, but when you're learning the basics of something, in my humble opinion, it should be a bit tedious. You really want to burn these words into your fucking brainium so you don't forget them. That govern the organization and meaning making of films. Meaning through systems of signs. Structuralism views films as a system of signs, right? Semiotics, the study of signs, that's where that comes in. We're going to learn a little bit more about semiotics in film, or the signs that are used in film. We're going to learn that here in a couple minutes, where meaning is not inherent in individual elements, but arises from their relationships and interactions. Like language, films use conventions, like genre tropes. We're going to get into that one too. Camera angles. That's going to be, I believe this month I have a stream on deep dive into camera angles, so you'll want to look out for that. I think that's actually next Friday. Deep dive into angles, yeah. So that'll be my next Friday's Film Buff Friday. So you'll want to look into that to understand angles a little better. So we don't dive too deep into those today. Codes such as symbolism, color palettes, right? The whole what we were talking about with the queer film theory example, analyzing the color of a particular scene, yeah. Okay, to convey meanings to an audience, right? Like McGreedy's bisexual. So structuralists explore how these signs and codes are used to construct narratives and meanings. Okay, so focus on structure and patterns. Structuralist film theory highlights the underlying structures. Oh, here we go. Such as narrative structures, e.g., the hero's journey. Yeah, I said that earlier. See, I know what I'm talking about. You know, kind of. I'm learning with you guys for real skis, but you know, as I'm understanding it, I'm trying to explain it in the way that I'm understanding it in hopes that it kind of helps you understand it too, right? Genre conventions, reoccurring themes. By identifying these patterns, structuralists aim to understand how films function as a whole. We get that? Okay, binary oppositions. A key concept in structuralism is the analysis of binary oppositions, which are pairs of contrasting concepts that are often used to structure narratives and convey meaning. So, contrasting concepts, hot, cold, good, bad, good versus evil, right? Those are contrasting concepts. And the idea, the theory here is that film uses these contrasting concepts, these binary opposites, to create a sense of meaning that is universal amongst people. Examples, here we go. Examples include good versus evil, man versus nature, cultural versus nature, and raw versus cooked. That's an odd one to have at the end. Raw versus cooked. It's like good versus evil, man versus society, and like a raw egg and a cooked egg. Like, hey, I guess those are opposite concepts, right? Structuralists analyze how these opposites are used to create conflict, tension, and meaning in a films. That's a really important one when talking about binary opposites, is that is a hell of a way to create conflicts. And we haven't dived into conflicts yet. I guess I have a video that kind of covers it on my YouTube channel in the Film Buff Friday playlist. It is called Elements of Storytelling. Oh, and I think that's my most watched video from my Film Buff Fridays. The Elements of Storytelling goes over conflict as an important element of a story, because it is. It's in my top 5, for me personally, just personal opinion, my top 5 most important elements to writing a good story. You have to have conflict. Characters have to conflict with one another in order for anything eventful to happen in the story. Okay, people thrive. The tension, all the juiciness is in the conflict of the story. Without it, your story is going to be boring as fuck. You know, it's going to be more boring than me sitting here for 2 hours talking about structuralism, right? So you don't want to your story can't be boring. It's the worst thing a story can be. You know, I can afford to be boring in my streams right now because it's mostly just my cutie pie that watches them, you know, so she forgives me for being boring. But, you know, you don't want that in a story, okay? So you have to create conflicts. There's a one way you can go about creating conflict is creating two characters that represent polar opposites. One represents evil, one represents good, one represents, you know, I don't know, democracy and communism, fascism and democracy. Pick it. Pick one you want, okay? You know what I'm saying? So, we're going to learn a little bit more about binary opposites and how to see them in film. This channel is one of my faves for understanding film theory. There's not a lot of YouTube channels that put film theory out just because there's not a lot of people that give a fuck about film theory, if we're just being honest, right? I mean, that's, you know, gotta accept that being somebody making a stream right now on film theory. I see the views on these particular streams and they're not my best streams, right? But there is a niche audience that enjoys them. And if you are one of those people, if you are watching now or you're watching this on YouTube, live stream or otherwise, if you probably are the kind of person, if you are the kind of person that sees a video that says structuralist film theory and you say, ooh, and you click on it, you might be one of those people that enjoys this kind of niche topic. And if so, then you do need to go check out the Media Insider here. Let's pop up to the YouTube screen. Media Insider is a very good channel for understanding film theory. Okay, so I give this a like. Already subscribed. I suggest you do the same. Tons of videos on this guy's channel. I refer to him a lot because he is a film theory teacher. He is a film theory professor, and he's very clearly good at his job, and he's very clearly passionate about his job, which I always appreciate when watching a YouTube video. So let's go ahead. It's only a 5-minute video. He's going to explain to us binary opposition and then explain a little more about this Claude Levi-Strauss feller and what he had to say about it. Okay, so let's pop this over to the full screen subtitles. Okay, check it out.
Have you ever noticed how kids talk about films in terms of goodies and baddies? It's not as stupid as it sounds, it's actually a very structured way of thinking. Let me show you how it works. In Back to the Future, if Doc and Marty are both the goodies, then the baddie is...
Go ahead, kid! Jump!
obviously Biff.
Suicide will be nice and neat.
If you think goodies in Star Wars, and baddies...
But you are not a Jedi yet.
Claude Levi-Strauss noticed this kind.
By the way, Cutie, what about his beard? Think I should get a beard and a mustache like that? I like that. I used to have that hairstyle too. That's a really high, I don't know if that's even a fade, really. I kind of like the fade, but you like that? I like that too. That's a good beard and a good mustache. Wanted your opinion on it. See, I might grow my facial hair out from this point to something like that, see how it works. But have to get the girlfriend's opinion on these kinds of things, guys. Yeah, well, I didn't need to ask if you liked the glasses. I already knew you did.
Kind of contrast in all stories, and it's his structural work that we're going to be looking at today. As always, if you're new here and you're a student of film or media, I recommend you subscribe to keep up with all my latest videos, and if you learn anything from this one, I'd really appreciate if you left a like. So, Claude Levi-Strauss was a structuralist thinker, which means he looked for patterns or rules in things to work out how they worked, a little bit like a rule book. So when he looked at myths and legends going all the way back to the Greeks to try and find out what they had in common and how they worked, he found that they all had something in common. At their heart, they all contained conflict between two sides, binary oppositions, themes that represented polarizing ideas and ideologies, good and bad, light and dark, order and chaos. You get the picture, the stuff that makes for great storytelling. Now, I don't want you to take this totally literally, like James Bond is the story of conflict between the British government and whatever foreign threat he's after. You need to think more thematically. So Bond might represent order, law, security, and the threat is actually chaos, terrorism, anarchy.
Well, I think I will call you on that one.
Many of these oppositions are used so commonly, and you're probably familiar with them, they become cliché. So in sci-fi, we have man versus machine, a conflict that warns of the dangers of our reliance on technology. Or maybe human versus aliens, and it's reminded that no matter where we're from, we're all human at the end of the day. In romance, we most commonly have monogamy versus adultery.
Oh my God, she was there. She was still there. She was in there when I was in there. Oh, yes.
And if we look at crime, we have law versus chaos, cheating versus honesty. Political dramas obviously brings the
That was a great film, by the way, LA Confidential. If you haven't seen that movie, you got to go check that movie out. That such a good noir movie, film noir, and oh, what's his bucket? Russell Crowe is such a mean shit in that. Good movie though, man, really good. Check that out if you haven't.
Political dramas obviously brings the left versus the right, but very often themes such as corruption versus purity or war versus peace.
I'm saying that when the president does it, that means it's not illegal.
I'm sorry?
That's what I believe.
These are just a few of the binary oppositions you're going to find in certain genres, but in each case, one side has to prevail. Now, something we already know from Todorov's narratology theory is whenever there's conflict or disruption, we need to have resolution. Check out up here if you haven't seen that video yet. So in the case of binary oppositions, which side should win? This is a bigger question than you might think, because whichever side wins and what they represent might be being portrayed as the correct option. Let's look back at our examples from earlier.
Now, I did want to point out, like I said, I really like this guy here. I'm going to fly back over here. Hello again. So I really like this guy's channel. It's awesome. It's a good channel. He does a great job on all his videos. I like every video he does. I use them on my Film Buff Fridays all the time because he's just very clear and articulate in the way that he explains the subject matter. He very clearly has a lot of experience in describing this subject matter, way more than I do, and it comes through in his videos, right? And it's very, very helpful. So I like this guy's channel. I also like this guy's channel because there's a lot of good juiciness to kind of disagree with him on, right? He did say here, and it's important how he words this, whichever side wins and what they represent
might be being portrayed
as the correct option. Might be portrayed, right? So it's nothing that I really disagree with him on per se, but that's important to note that it might be getting portrayed as the right one. It isn't always, okay? The bad guy does win sometimes. And when the bad guy wins in a movie, that doesn't necessarily mean the bad guy was right, right? So that's an important distinction to make, because sometimes people do not make that distinction in movies. It's kind of just a personal bugaboo. They think because one character is portrayed as the protagonist that they are necessarily good people. And that's not entirely the case, you know, like, if you haven't noticed yet, these binary oppositions, there are subjective to some extent. It's very easy, and you've probably seen people do this, right? Where they think they analyze the story as good versus evil. And in a lot of cases, that's not even the case. It's not saying that the movie itself, one could argue, you know, I can't think of a specific example right here, but one would argue that this movie isn't saying anybody is good or bad. Oh, like Mother's Instinct. That's an absolutely good example. Yeah, cutie pie. Look at you coming with the good examples and everything. Jeez Louise. Yeah, if y'all haven't seen the thriller Mother's Instinct with Jessica Chastain and who was the other lady in there? Cutie pie, do you remember? Oh, you're bad with names. You probably don't remember that. But you remember the movie, though, and that was Anne Hathaway. Wow, I have never seen you so good with a name before. You just pulled that out. Ooh, look at you. You're on fire today, cutie. Anne Hathaway and Jessica Chastain. Really interesting. I mean, you know, spoiler alerts. The end of that movie is the bad guy generally wins, right? But everyone knows Anne Hathaway. Well, that is true. Yeah, that's true. Good point. She is kind of famous, I suppose. So, but good example, though, cutie pie. I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah, Mother's Instincts, spoiler alert, like I already said, bad guy wins. But the movie isn't saying the bad guy was right, right? And, you know, whether or not the movie is even actually using a good or bad dynamic binary opposite, that's up to question too. Movies will just give you characters and say this is a conflict between two characters. Nobody's necessarily right or wrong. You know, there's a good movie for that. There's a movie out there. God, the characters are all fucked up because, oh, Hateful Eight. Hateful Eight is a great movie where none of the characters can be portrayed as necessarily inherently good. Okay. Every single character in that movie is, to some extent or another, either a war criminal, a vicious murderer, a full-blown racist, a woman beater. Every single character in that movie has some horrible or a full-blown criminal, somebody who kills people. The one woman in there is a full-blown criminal that just kills people for shits and giggles. She is crazy as shit, and a belligerent racist. All these characters have bad aspects of them, and you can't really look at any single character and say, that's the good guy. This movie isn't about good and evil, okay? But somebody does win, and they do represent binary opposites. I mean, literally, it's the North and the South, and the Civil War is represented in that movie. Man versus woman is represented in that movie. White versus black is represented in that movie. Racist versus non-racist is represented in that movie. Tons of different representations in that movie that don't necessarily have to be good and bad, right? So sometimes it's way deeper than just good and bad. You know, just wanted to add that in there, a nice little rant that I can clip out and put in my shorts if I listen back and decide that I said something that sounded halfway smart. Okay, let's continue with this guy, though, because what this guy has to say is all the way smart.
Let's look back at our examples from earlier. I think it's safe to say most people would say monogamy and being faithful to your partner is the right thing to do. Well, this is exactly how we see conflict of being faithful versus unfaithful played out in countless rom-coms.
I did want to point out there, I think there's a slight difference between faithfulness and monogamy, right? Monogamy is the opposite of polygamy, having one partner versus having multiple partners. Not the same thing as faithful and unfaithful. Faithful is I'm pointing at her butt with my cursor. I don't mean to do that. Let's point at her face. Faithfulness means staying true to your partner, which would mean saying, hey, I'm only with you. Unfaithful would mean cheating on your partner, which is saying, hey, I'm only with you, but then going out with other people, which isn't the same thing as polygamy, right? So I would only contest here, thing that I contest in this video is, yeah, in a movie, we'll see that binary of faithful versus unfaithful. And that binary almost always happens in a monogamous relationship because that's where faithful and unfaithful, where it's its most powerful. It's a little bit more difficult. I think it's possible, but a little bit more difficult to be unfaithful in an open relationship, since that's kind of the point of the open relationship is we're banging other people. Yes. So that binary comes out more vividly in a monogamous relationship, but monogamy isn't the same thing as faithful. People can be quote unquote monogamist in the sense that they believe you should only be with one person, or they say that, and then they go out and have sex with a whole bunch of people. That person would still be, I guess, monogamous, but they would be unfaithful. They would have a value that they don't adhere to. So
we're usually spared the tragedy of a bitter breakup after one character is unfaithful, but not before we find out just how devastating things would have been had they actually been unfaithful.
Don't do that.
Yep. We see that if you're unfaithful, you will end up with pain, or if you are faithful, then you'll live happily ever after. Another interesting way that you might want to see binary oppositions representing ideologies is in the film Free Guy. On the surface, this is just a simple story of a character who is trying to break free from his programming and become independent. On the one side, you have the non-player characters who all want freedom but are oppressed, and on the other side you have the antagonist, Antoine, who wants absolute control over what they do. Could it be, if we apply binary opposition and see these as themes, that this represents democracy versus communism?
Buddy, if we're not real, doesn't that mean that nothing you do matters?
I know this might be a stretch, but ideologically...
Yeah, I was going to say, that's quite a stretch for that movie. I don't know if they're attempting to represent political ideologies in the movie Free Guy, right? This is where film theory can get a little bit, cringy. And not saying he's being cringy, right? It's hard for him to be cringy with this beard and those glasses, right, cutie? He's not cringy. But the idea itself can sometimes get so overplayed in movies, right? I'm going to come back over here because I can. Sometimes in movies, when people are particularly film theorists, particularly film theory and theater kids, can get a little bit too intense with this. Every single movie represents political ideologies, and it can get a little old. I'm definitely one of those sayings where you see people on Reddit and they're like, did you know in this movie they're actually talking about how America sucks? And it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, bro. Like, yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, great. totally take your opinion, and I've processed it, and I don't care. So, and not to say all that about this guy, you know, saying that that's what he's doing now, but what he said there, it does seem like a bit of a stretch to me. He even says it. He says, I know this might be a bit of a stretch. He understands, like, it's kind of a bit of a stretch to say that you know, that the film Free Guy, or what, shoot, I forget the name of it. Not Free Guy. Oh, yeah, it was Free Guy, right? I forget. I mean, that was a funny movie, but whatever the name of that movie was, that it is about democracy versus communism. That's a bit of a stretch when none of these words are ever mentioned in the movie, and you got just the most basic elements. I mean, you're taking communism and democracy and breaking them down to just the teeniest, tiniest core of what they are, and then saying, well, it's about this thing. And it's like, well, democracy is a lot more than just the freedom to do what you want. You know, you don't even really have that in democracy, right? You can't go kill people in a fucking democracy because you feel like you want to. Like elementals. What's with elementals? Hold on. I didn't see that message when it popped up. What about elementals? Is it a good example of what I'm talking about? It could be like elementals. It absolutely could be. Here, let me pop over here so we can see the chat too. So yeah, and it could be like elementals. But yeah, you have movies where people, you know, you're taking the most basic element of democracy. Oh, about people always thinking it's political or racial thing. Oh yeah, yeah. They did that with Elementals. Oh god, they do it with every fucking movie that has ever existed. I actually have a few people who make YouTube videos and TikToks doing that exact thing. And I have them saved, and I think I'm gonna do a Film Buff Friday about this person being completely wrong and show the proof that they're wrong. Because I have one guy saved on my Reddit that does this. He takes every movie and turns it into how it could mean this politically, and he goes out of his way to lie about it. Though he actually makes shit up. Like he'll say things like, "Well, the director said this," and then if you look it up, the director never said that. There's no evidence that the director said this movie's about how America sucks or how white people are shit or whatever he says it's about. And it's like, that never happened. Nobody ever said that. And if that's the case, then it's kind of like, you know, man, like somebody has to, I figured it would be good controversial, what's the content to call this guy out and to call people like him out and show the proof live on stream, show his video, then show the live proof on how this dude's just making shit up, because there's a lot of them who are doing that, you know, and it happens on both sides of the political aisle. People that say this movie is about how capitalism is the best, and then people saying this movie is about how capitalism is shit. And it's like, I'm pretty sure that movie is like about a fucking cat. You know, like, I don't think it has anything to do with capitalism, right? I mean, you kind of really need to stretch it. And people just do that so often. And it's one of the things, the thing you're talking about, Cutie, it's one of those things that a lot of theater kids and film buffs like myself, you know, you're searching for that meaning. That's the whole point of learning film theory. That's what we're learning about today, is we're learning how to find that meaning in a movie. But you can always take it too far. You can always overanalyze everything. You know, this was in one of my streams I did on a Mental Health Monday. The concept, you know, one of my favorite sayings is, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. Okay, it doesn't matter what it is. You can always overdo it. And you can absolutely overdo it with the analyzing of a movie, particularly with shoving politics into it. Out of burp. And you can especially be very biased. When it comes to politics, we're talking about touchy stuff for a lot of people. And when it gets to that point, it's very easy for people to have very biased analysis, where every movie they see, every good movie they see, is my politics are correct. And it's like, okay, if that's really where you're coming from, what are the chances you are actually correct? What are the chances every filmmaker who ever made a good movie made a movie about your politics and how it's right? Seriously, just be serious with yourself. How the fuck would that even be a possibility? Come on. Don't be silly. Don't be silly. Don't be a silly goose and do that and be one of those people. Yeah. But yes, good example. Again, Cutie Pie, you're just killing it with the examples today. Okay, let's let Mr. Nicebeard here finish his rant. I got my rant in. Let's let him have his. But I do agree his analysis there was a bit of a stretch. But he's just doing it to prove the point of how you can see these ideological opposites in movies. That's really all he's trying to do. Give you a good example.
It's interesting that the person who wants absolute power is ultimately defeated, and freedom, democracy, prevails. So, Strauss's work on binary opposition is actually quite simple. Narratives contain themes which conflict with each other, and the way that they're resolved might suggest ideology. But how do we as an audience identify binary opposites? In film, there are very often stylistic clues that act as signposts to them. Let's take the Force in Star Wars, Jedi versus Sith, or good versus evil. We see this in oppositional costumes, colors, lighting. Even the camera work looks different. Stylistically, this is showing us two oppositional forces. Essentially, it comes down to this. If you're analyzing film, where can you see the most polarizing characters? What do they represent? What are their motives? Who wins, and what does that say about society?
Just even a note, he already pointed out the color thing. Bad guy dressed in black with red saber, good guy, face uncovered, dressed in clothes that much closer represents your average person, and blue lightsaber, right? Kind of like blue, white as in heavenly, red as in demon, devil, hiding his face, has that feeling of like sneakiness to it, right? Darth Vader here, he's a sneaky fuck, hides his face. Luke, open face, totally, wants to show who he being honest. You can kind of like see the honesty versus deception thing going on there. And then of course, dressed kind of like your average day dude. I mean, you look at that in that particular, I know it isn't, but if you just from this angle with the shadows, it almost looks like he's wearing a t-shirt with a long sleeve shirt underneath, and like a regular dude's clothes. And then this guy's got the fucking helmet and the big gloves and the military boots. You see these different binaries, right?
Or to put it even more simply, who are the goodies and who are the baddies? That's all for today, guys. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you've learned anything, if you've made it to this point, I'd really appreciate if you left a like. And if you're looking for where to go next, I'd recommend checking out that video on narratology I mentioned earlier.
I do love when they point to a part of the screen and it's the wrong side of the screen. I think it's always funny. Okay. Yeah, wow. I didn't realize we were already on an hour and 40 minutes. So we only got technically 20 minutes left in the stream, but I'm going to keep going until we get through everything, because it's not going to be that much longer. When I'm talking about shit that I love to talk about, I always end up over talking. It happens. So, okay. So there was the Media Insider on binary opposites or binary opposition. I think it's a great video. I'm going to have it down in the links to my YouTube video, so you can go check his video out. Give it a like and subscribe to his channel if you really enjoy film theory content, right? Because, yeah, this guy really helps with understanding that sort of thing. So, in any case, I feel like we got a good enough understanding of binary opposition, and that is one of those systems, or excuse me, one of those structures or rules within a system that we want to be analyzing in order to find the meaning in a movie. And he gave us a great idea on how we do that using binary oppositions. But what are some of the other elements that we need to understand, right? Well, so I guess this is more about binary oppositions by Beverly Boy Productions. This was just a little bit of added context for binary opposition. And I do think Media Insider did a good enough job that we understand it now. So I'm just going to link this article in the description of the video for you to check out if you'd like some further reading. Like I said, Beverly Boy Productions, I use their website a lot because they explain a lot of film theory orientated topics, and they're really good for that. But you see here, they got a quick rundown of binary opposition. So go check out this article in the description if you feel like you don't fully grasp the concept of binary opposites, right? This is another resource for you to get that will help with that. So we're going to jump into semiotics. Okay, that's going to be another one of these structures, these structures or patterns that we're going to want to look at in film, right? So like we've already gone over semiotics. It's the study of signs, essentially signs and behavior regarding signs, what signs mean to our culture. Yeah. So we're going to deep dive into that a little bit more and see how semiotics, the study of signs, how we can use that in film to create a structuralist film theory analysis of a film. How can what are the signs that we can spot using the concept of semiotics, right? The not the concept, the discipline of semiotics, right? The school of semiotic thought, right? So before we do that, though, I'm gonna do it to you. I'm gonna do it to you. I need to go pee. I need to pee really, really fucking bad and get a coffee. So I'm gonna do that and kiss my cutie pie. Got to do those things too. So I'm gonna do all three of those things super quick. And then when we come back, we will watch this video. But you chill, enjoy this lovely be right back screen, and I will see you guys in here in just like 2 or 3 minutes. All right. Okay. Testing. We are back. Okay. Hello again, everybody. I had to go take a quick pee there. Let me see. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Swapping some stuff over real quick, making sure my stream's still doing its thing. Because, I just started streaming on YouTube recently. So, kind of checking to make sure. Oh, making sure the internet's good. Looks like that's good. 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 And then we're going to watch this video here. He's going to explain. Again, it's about a 10-minute video. So, it's a bit longer than the videos I usually go to. But that's all good. No big deal. Okay. Let's pop over here. Okay. So let's go ahead and watch this guy's video. This is Media Insider again, right? Same dude with the sexy beard and the hair. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and watch this video. Let me throw you over on the YouTube screen. This is about semiotic analysis for beginners in film, right? So check it out. See what he has to say.
I'm going to be honest, I don't think I can explain semiotics theory any better than Matt Damon.
Game of Thrones King's Road is now available for both PC and mobile with Google Play Games.
It's bullshit.
Not that bit, the next bit.
This isn't even my tie. In fact, our data suggests that I have to stick to either a tie that is red or a tie that is blue. A yellow tie made it look as if I was taking my situation lightly, and I may in fact pull my pants down again at any moment. A silver tie meant that I'd forgotten my roots. My shoes. You know, shiny shoes we associate with high-priced lawyers and bankers. If you want to get a working man's vote, you need to scuff up your shoes a little bit, but you can't scuff them up so much that you alienate the lawyers and the bankers, because you need them to pay for the specialist back in Tenafly.
In that clip, he's basically talking about the meanings of signs, and that's exactly what we're going to uncover today in this video about semiotics. So,
I have never seen that movie, but that looked like a really good movie. I might have to check that out later.
Semiotics literally means the study of signs. In other words, the way we make sense of everything around us. So let's start at the beginning. What is a sign? It could be anything. A symbol, a color, a camera angle. How do you know what it is? Semiotics. Let's take a look with an example. Here is a sign, something that we can infer meaning from. It's called the signifier because it's creating meaning. Now there are two types of meaning we can get from this.
Remember we talked about that? The signifier, the signified. The signified would be the meaning.
This sign. The first is the denotation. That's literally what it is. So to anyone who recognizes it, this is the Apple computer logo. However, it also has a connotation. That is a sort of associated meaning. So although it is literally a picture of an apple or a logo, it might mean to you high-tech equipment, technology made in California, iPhones, mass consumerism. Now these aren't the only connotations of this sign, because it depends on your ideology, your background, your culture. So depending on these factors, you might look at this and think Chinese sweatshops. You might look and think overpriced equipment. The reason for this is signs are polysemic, poly meaning many, so we can read signs around us in many, many different ways. Now, I'm going to go into some more detail, but actually, that's essentially it. It's the basis for all semiotic analysis we do in media studies, identifying signs and understanding what they mean and why the producer has selected them. So other than logos, where else should we look for signs? Well, it depends on what kind of media form you're studying. For today, let's look at signs in moving image. Here's one of my favorite texts to use as a starting point for analysis. It's called Tales of Terror for Tokyo, and the reason I like using it is because it's not in English. So when we remove language, which is where we get a great deal of our meaning from, how much can you still understand based on other signs in the text? Have a watch.
All right, so what are you getting from this, right? So far, I'm getting the music, very dark, very low end, bassy, sinister, mysterious. You're getting the banging and the slamming on the door, which sounds like somebody trying to get through that door really wants to get through that door or get the attention of somebody else on the other side of that door. You'll see like the way she's moving, the way the camera's moving from her POV or point of view, the way she peeks around the corner. She's just for some reason scared, right? That kind of mirrors what the music is saying, that something sinister is going on here, that the guy banging on the other side of the door isn't the fucking milkman. You know, or if he is, he might be a real dick, you know, or, you know, a monster, or this might be like a really bad guy on the other side of the door. So those are some like things that I'm getting off of this right off the back. Yeah. I don't know. If you have anything you can think of, add it in the comments.
誰? だから町子おばちゃんって言ってるでしょ。早くここを開けなさい。
Yeah, see, the knocking almost feels a little inhuman, right? Like to be knocking that intensely, like, and then that voice very monotone, like there's a weirdness there. I mean, there's almost an oddness there because you're not sure. I mean, that doesn't sound like a normal person. You know, those signs, right? Those semiotics aren't coming through in the way they normally would. You know, if somebody was knocking on your door and you said, "Yeah, who's there?" and we don't know what they're saying because it's in Japanese and I don't speak Japanese. But, you know, if you're saying like, "Hey, who's there?" you know, and they say, "Oh, wow, hey, like I need inside because something bad's happening out here." You know, you hear the intent that in their voice that there's something going on and you need to open a door, this person needs help, something like that. But that was a very monotone voice where you weren't given any sign of any sign of emotional distress or anything like that. And you combine that very monotone, calm voice with that rapid banging on the door, and it's kind of like a mix of signals almost to me, right? I don't know. Again, if you can think of something, throw it down in the chat. Hurry up. Yeah. You know, that's absolutely. Yeah. You're getting the banging on the door definitely says hurry up, right? That's like the sign I'm getting from that is hurry up, get there, whatever. Some kind of, you know, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be distress, but what's the word? There's haste behind that constant knocking. You know, there's an intensity to it. And to me, it doesn't gel well with the voice. The voice is completely opposite of that, where it was just so flat monotone, which makes it seem unhuman, or there's not a disassociation. What's the word I'm looking for here? There's a oh, what do they call it, man? There's a thing there where it just doesn't feel good. There's a paradox in the two that makes it seem slightly inhuman, right? So, but yeah, hurry up is definitely what you get, especially from the initial knocking on the door. Ooh. Okay, see the voice right there. You hear that harshness in the voice. Now it sounds even less human, right? And then the hand through there. Let's look at that hand again. That hand was a freaky fucking hand. Dude needs to clean his fingernails. See, I might not have fingernails, red fingernails. Oh, that means hurry up in Japanese. You're being serious. Okay, yeah. Yes, I didn't know that. I mean, goes to stand it. You are my little Japanese girl, so you would speak some Japanese. But yeah, okay, interesting. That means hurry up in Japanese. Did not know that. Learn something new every day. Before long, you're going to be my Japanese, Samoan, Spanish, Filipino speaker. You're just going to be my little Rosetta Stone. Okay, if you look at that hands, it has an inhumanness to it, right? Whether that's red nail polish, whatever's going on there, contrasting with the color of that hand, it has a zombie kind of feel to it, right? Like that almost looks kind of deadish, you know? Very lacking in color. And then that kind of growl hiss right there. I don't really know if that's coming from the other side of the door, but it doesn't sound good. That's an interesting shot. That's a really cool shot. From the floor level, her floor level, I mean, this might be stretching. This is what you're kind of supposed to do with semiotics in movies, yeah, but this whole shot makes her seem really small, and with these walls, it makes me feel a little like claustrophobic, right? Like this girl doesn't have a lot of options. She can't do a whole lot for whatever her present situation is, and she's overwhelmed by it, right? And she looks small in the frame, and she's closed in by walls on all sides. Like she's fucked, basically. Wow, who was ever on the other side of that door really fucking freaks this little girl out. I wonder, like, is there a possible meaning behind, like, the color pink? I don't know what pink really represents, but... It's odd how bland the walls, the door... Notice there's no pictures or anything. Nothing's decorated. It's just very flat. Very monotone.
お姉ちゃんお母さん
That's no good.
So just to give you some context, no doubt you've picked up on the fact that someone's trying to force their way into this house and the little girl is very scared. You have no idea what they're saying, but you've got a great deal of meaning there because of the...
That's not true. My cutie pie does. So take that, beard man.
Signs in moving image. Now there are essentially 4 categories of signs that we look for in film. The first one is mise en scene, which is a word which literally means everything within the scene. So the set, the costume, the hair, the makeup. In this particular case, you might have noticed that the corridor was very cramped. They chose to shoot it in a place which felt quite claustrophobic.
Boom, boom. Oh, look at that. I promise I didn't watch this video beforehand. I got it. Look at me, Mr. fucking Film Theory over here, cutie pie, saying all smart and shit. Oh, pink represents softness, love, affection, femininity, right? Well, that very much might have something to do with this character. Yeah. I mean, young girl represents softness, affection, love. Oh. Kind of like an innocent child, right? Makes you... I mean, just the fact that it's a child that this thing's coming after, whatever it is on the other side of the door, it freaks you out even more, right? Because it would be different if this monster was coming, whatever it is, was coming from an adult. You know, you would feel like they would have more of a fighting chance. But the fact that they're coming for a small child even makes the whole situation a little bit worse, you know, because children represent that innocence, you know, that affection, you know, naivete, helplessness, that kind of thing.
There was also a lack of decoration. The walls were very plain and white.
Cutie, I was born for this film theory shit.
Right, they lacked personality. It almost felt very cold. And finally, by selecting a girl who looked quite sweet and innocent and cute, the feeling of terror, like when you're a child, was so much more than had it been an adult trying.
Are you seeing this, cutie? This guy's stealing all my best lines. Oh, that's crazy. I'm not usually right when I say things like this. That's why it's a big deal to me.
To let someone in. The next category we have is sound. So...
yeah, okay. In the category of sound, we went over that. The music, the non-diegetic sound, the music in the background was very ominous. That banging represented the intensity. Something really wants this girl. The monotone in the voice, I wonder if he brings that up. Think he's going to bring that up, the monotone voice.
You might see signs in the form of music, sound effects, the way people sound. I mean, listen to the voice of the person behind the door. You probably have no idea what they're saying, but the tone of the voice, that is creating meaning that we should be afraid of this person. They're angry, they're aggressive. Likewise, sound can be used very...
Yeah, so I didn't pick up angry and aggressive, I guess. I thought, like, my mind was on, like, some grudge shit. Like, oh, this is some grudge bitch behind the door. This little girl's fucked. That's what I was picking up.
Very effectively with music. Here we've got these kind of discordant chimes, which almost sound like prickles down your back. And it just as effectively creates meaning with no sound. Remember this clip where there was no noise at all?
Yeah. Really ups the intensity.
Why can't I make any changes without an admin approval?
Why can't I watch a video without your fucking face on it?
Here, the lack of sound is what makes it feel so held breath, so terrifying. Next up, we have camera work, which is a huge signifier in moving image texts. I've made...
Oh, yeah, camera work. That would be the shots, right? I guess I didn't say nothing about that, you know. I did notice... I'm going to put this down before he says it. I'm going to drop the gauntlet. Well, maybe not. I don't know. We'd have to go back and watch it, but I don't really want to. Yeah. I don't know. Let's see what he says about shots. Okay, that's something that I'm apparently maybe I'm not too good at analyzing. So let's see what he has to say.
A video all about reading cinematography. I'll put a link at the end of the video. But essentially, we can look at the way the camera is framed, the composition, the movement, and how that might be creating meaning for the audience. So in this case, we had an awful lot of extreme wide-angle shots, sometimes bordering on like fisheye. Again, this really emphasized just the amount of space and how small the young girl looked in these small rooms. And then finally, we look at editing in film. And this literally means the use of sequencing, how...
I did kind of say that. Yeah, you were there, Cutie Pie. You can back me up. I did say that one shot makes that little girl seem very small, like helpless, like overwhelmed almost. Anyways.
One clip moves directly to another. A couple of things which I felt were really effective in this clip was the extended scene where there wasn't any cutting for a while. Because this scene was so long, again, it added to that kind of held breath sensation we had with the lack of music. Furthermore, by cutting from a shot of her face, eyes wide and terrified, straight to the door handle, we're creating the meaning that she is afraid of whatever is trying to get in. So now we know what signs are.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I didn't pick up on any of that.
And where to find them. Let's take a look at some of the wider implications of semiotics. Signs are selected by media producers to create specific meaning. Take a look at this example. In my new magazine, I could select this picture to represent Plymouth, or I could select this one. My decision is going to create a huge amount of meaning for the audience. That's a huge amount of influence I have over.
Be honest, that image is kind of cool. I don't know what it conveys, but compared to the other image.
New magazine, I could select this picture.
Yeah, for a magazine, you'd probably want that one, yeah.
To represent Plymouth. Or I could select this one. My decision is going to create a huge amount of meaning for the audience. That's a huge amount of influence I have over my audience, my selection of signs. So what happens when a sign is used consistently in culture? Barthes argues that when this happens, a sign can become a myth. And a myth is almost like an accepted dominant connotation of a sign. So a great example of this would be a bulldog, which, at least to British audiences, is an accepted sign for Churchill or Britishness. At the end of the day, it's just a dog, but in England, it is an accepted belief of what it means. We call this process naturalization. Think of it as the media shaping society's ideology through repeated use of signs. So another great example of a myth through the process of naturalization would be the representation of Dungeons and Dragons.
So that concept is very, very important in my opinion. Okay, it's an opinion, not a fact, but I personally... I mean, I believe it's 100% true. Not only is it true, in my opinion, but it's very important when you're understanding what kind of a cultural impact a movie has, understanding how this movie and other movies are continuing to repeat the same patterns. It does shape. It is naturalized in the culture by people who continuously watch this movie in the masses. They begin to naturalize these patterns and see them as, in some case, true. Even, you know, like a bulldog represents Winston Churchill. I would have never fucking thought that. But apparently to British people, that is a thing, you know? And so it's important to keep an eye out for that in movies. Because when you can see a continuous pattern being shown in a movie, there's a good idea there that there's at least somebody in the process of making these movies, all these different people who are trying to naturalize a myth in people's minds, right? Like, I mean, that's essentially how filmmakers use propaganda subtly. That's the big thing. That's the subtle use of propaganda. It's just continuously pushing this myth in a movie, right? If you think back to how Russians in the 80s were constantly portrayed as the bad guys, that was a form of propaganda. We were in the middle of the Cold War in the 80s, and this is well documented. This isn't an opinion of mine. This is well documented. Here, we're going to have to go back to the rant screen. This is a well documented phenomenon. Okay, I'm not making this up. This isn't an opinion. Like, American filmmakers regularly put Russian men as the bad guys in a lot of your 80s and a very large amount of 80s action flicks. And there was a reason for that. It was propaganda. Shitballs. Microphone. It was propaganda. It was to make you afraid, make American audiences afraid of Russians. And we were in the middle of the Cold War. It would behoove the American government to want a society that is afraid of Russians, because then we are more willing to play along with the Cold War and even the possibility of going to a hot war, actual dropping bombs and shit on Russians. And the reality, you know, that propaganda serves a purpose for the government. But the reality is a lot of Russians probably at that time didn't give a shit, right? They were like, they have the jobs and husbands and wives and kids and all the same responsibilities you have in the world. They're not concerned with killing you because you're a fucking American, right? If they are, there's a possibility that they feel that way because of all the Russian propaganda that tells them Americans are this, that, and the other thing, right? You see how governments there can use media to force populations to hate each other when realistically there might not be any reason at all to hate each other. You see what I'm saying? Hollywood has done this over and over again. There is plenty of evidence that Hollywood has done this and has never stopped doing it. Okay, so if you just watch movies nowadays, it's just an exercise. Watch movies nowadays and see who constantly fits the role of a bad guy in today's modern films and television. I guarantee you, because this is Hollywood, this is the film industry we're talking about, they have a myth that they're trying to push. Who is the bad guy in most films and most television nowadays? You know, look at them and just see if you notice any patterns, right? It's worth noting just to see, because I guarantee you there's some form of propaganda happening there, right? So that concept that he's talking about here of using a continuous pattern, signs, constantly showing them to an audience through film, that is a form of, I guess you could say, light propaganda, or a much sneakier form of propaganda is what it is. What it can turn into, anyways, when it's wielded by the wrong hands. Doesn't have to always be used for propaganda, but it certainly can be.
Throughout the 1980s, the media kept painting Dungeons and Dragons with very, very negative signs that signify...
Okay, see, what are we talking about here? What this right here was propaganda.
That it was associated with devil worship, that actually it very nearly killed off the game. So that's semiotics in a nutshell. Once you get your head around it and you have that penny dropping moment and you realize that everything you look at, from this weird shape in front of me, which I know means microphone, but it also means recording, YouTube, it means so much more. Once you realize this, it's kind of like a bit of a mind-blowing moment. And I think media teachers always love it when students kind of come out with that line, "You've totally ruined watching films for me," because I'm looking at everything for meaning now. But once you get your head around this topic, it will really unlock your ability to analyze texts. Now, there's a few videos I'd really recommend you move on to from here. The first is the one I mentioned earlier, how to read cinematography. So that looks purely at how we can look at...
You can go to this person's channel, Media Insider. Again, I'll have this video linked in the comments, right? And check out his cinematography video. It's very good. I also have that same video in my 8 Elements of Film Theory. So, or deep dive into shots, excuse me. So you check that out. That video is also in there, with some other YouTube videos that also go over how to analyze cinematography, specifically camera shots, right? So I still recommend going to this guy's channel and, what's the word? Not following, subscribing to his channel. Give him a like, subscribe to that shit, especially if you like film theory content.
At signs in terms of camera work in film and what they might mean. Or if you're more interested in the idea of different cultures, different people reading the same signs in different ways, you might want to investigate Stuart Hall's reception theory, which you can watch here. As always, thanks for watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.
That looks like a good video. We'll have to check that out. Okay, so there is Media Insiders. Awesome video. Give it a like. Subscribe to this dude's channel for some good film theory content, but this is him teaching us semiotics. And now semiotics, right? Remember, let's pop back here. Hello again. Remember how intense those fucking definitions were at the beginning of the stream, right? Structuralism and semiotics. It's like, oh my God, this is so intense. now you should have a pretty good understanding of it, right? At this point, I'm like, okay, this is much easier to understand. And it's actually kind of fucking cool. Semiotics is fucking dope, right? I mean, that is the nerdiest shit I've said all day, right? I'm sure I said something nerdier yesterday, but that's my nerdy quote for the day. Semiotics is dope, right? It is pretty neat how you can watch a movie and see all these different signs in there and get meaning from all of it that isn't there in the language, right? That's pretty cool. And that's really neat. And that's an important thing to know how to do if you're going to be analyzing film, which is why I need it. When I read about structuralist film theory, I was like, shit, I do have to do a video on it. Yeah. Okay. So there it is. That's semiotics. Now we're going to get into a little bit of learning a little bit more about the different signs and codes by filminquiry.com. This is another website that I go to pretty frequently for film theory orientated stuff. Okay. So we're going to learn a little bit about signs and codes, filmic code, index, different types of codes in film, right? So let's jump into it. We learned about binary opposition and we learned about semiotics, the general idea of how you apply semiotics to film, which is an important aspect of structuralist film theory. Now we're going to learn about some of the more distinct, specific signs and codes within a film. Yeah. And then after that, we have a little bit to read about genre conventions. That plays a role in it as well. I'm not going to go through it, but I'm going to link a film analysis, a structuralist film analysis for The Matrix, which is a really good read. And then I got some other really good reads for you guys here, just some resources to add to your repertoire that I'll add into the description of the YouTube video for you to do a little bit of extra homework in this if you feel like you would want to do a little bit more deep diving into it, because it is a really cool concept. Yeah. So, had a cough. Okay. Signs and codes. In semiotic analysis, right, which you and me are now experts of, right, because we did this live stream, the smallest units of meaning are signs. For example, the way someone dresses is a collection of signs that informs others about the person. Clothing encodes the smallest of signs. Like a popped collar means preppy. A black band t-shirt and oversized pants signify a music fan, but together they can create a collection of signs, which is a code. So code is a collection of signs. Signs are the smallest unit of meaning that can be applied by, the clothes you wear, your attitude is a sign, your facial hair is a sign, right? All that, okay? For example, a band shirt plus baggy pants plus black nail polish plus dyed hair could signal a rebel or a goth, right? Or punk rocker, right? Think, mohawk represents punk rock. You know what I'm saying? You could say something has two levels. On its most basic level, there is the sign, the denotation, which is the literal meaning of the sign. Okay, we went over this in that video we just watched, right? Literal media or media fuckballs. What was the name of that channel? I talked about it numerous times, and now I can't. Media something. Media Insider. That's it. I keep wanting to say media literacy. Media Insider, right? Went over this. At the most basic level, there is the sign with the denotion, which is the literal meaning of it. But when a sign occurs in a group or in a particular context, it becomes a code, and it can suggest a connote or extra meaning. That's the connotation, right? You have the sign. He went over this with the Apple logo. You have the actual Apple logo. When you see the denotation, the denotion, the literal meaning is Apple company, but it has a connotation with it. And that connotation can mean high tech. It can mean Silicon Valley. It can mean, child labor in China, okay? Because there's a lot of different things that are attached now to Apple and thus the logo, right? For instance, the color red simply denotes a color, but in a certain context, it can connote emotion like anger or love. These codes are often used in media to reinforce subtly the way audiences should think about certain things or how they should behave. These are cultural dominant ideologies. For instance, a long-standing cultural ideology is that diamonds or chocolate symbolize love, and that people should give this to your significant other as proof of their love for the other, right? That is a cultural idea, okay? That doesn't exist in other cultures in the world. There's some cultures in the world where you would not give chocolate to your loved one, right? You would give them, I don't know, a fucking fried cockroach, right? Here's a fried cockroach on a stick. That means I love you, diamonds is steadily going out in the culture. A lot of people, particularly in younger generations, have came around to the idea that diamonds are only worth something because people say they are. And it might not be the best representation of value or the best store of value, and thus might not be something anymore that is seen as something you give to somebody you love, right? They still look real nice. Diamonds still look flashy. To a lot of people, diamonds still mean wealth. But to other people, because they are expensive, so they still do mean that. But to other people, they're losing that connotation of love. Now they just mean you have the money to throw around and waste on a fucking diamond. So these codes are groups of signs that seem to fit together naturally. Together, they create meaning. To stick to the signs and codes of romance, the sign of a broken heart means lost love. And if you add the broken heart to the sign of two people, the three signs together, the code, anyone will read into that the couple has broken off their relationship or something to that effect, right? Right now, the relationship is struggling. Okay, again, you can, in the world of signs, you can read multiple connotations from a sign, right? Particularly connotations. Denotations, it seems like you generally got one denotation or just much less of the denotations, much more connotations you can get from any one specific sign, or a code, which, as we know now, because we're smart and shit and we research, is signs put together. A series of signs put together is a code. So what are codes in film? Filmic code. 4 types of signs and codes exist in semiotic analysis of film. There is indexal signs, okay? Remember we kind of talked about the 3 different categories of signs in actual semiotics, right? We had index signs, referential signs, and symbolic signs. Well, we're going to echo some aspects of that here in semiotic analysis of film. Indexal signs. These are the most basic signs in film. Indexal signs indirectly point to a certain meaning. Again, a good representation of that is the sign of falling rocks would denote that ahead there's the possibility, that's a road sign, by the way. If any of you haven't seen the road sign, there's a road sign that has falling rocks, and that means you get it a lot out here in the Midwest. Up ahead is a cliff where there may be falling rocks. The funniest sign I ever seen was, oh gosh, there was one, it was a cow. It was just a big fat cow on a sign, and the meaning, I suppose, would be cow. Right? There's cows on this road, which is important to note. If you ever lived in Wyoming or anywhere like that, fucking cows, they will fuck your shit up. You can even have a grill guard on your truck, and all that means is it's going to kill that cow quicker, but your truck is still going to be totaled, right? So that's a pretty important sign. Oh, cutie pie. Remember you and me went to Casper, and we were driving through Casper, and there was just a random yellow sign that said blind man. Like, what the fuck I remember we laughed about that. We were like, what does that sign even mean? Like, does that mean a blind man lives here? Or does that mean blind man crossing the road? Like, you remember that? So, you can get different. The most basic level is what this sign indirectly points to. For example, smoke means fire. Panting means exercise. Yeah, I remember that too. That was pretty funny. I think it was Denver, actually, is where we're at. But anyways, a ringing bell means end of class. This type of sign is constantly used in all types of media, and they are very common. Symbolic codes. Symbolic codes often denote something they have nothing to do with at first glance, but only because the code exists and because we use them society-wide. For instance, the red heart symbolizes love, white dove symbolizes peace, the color green symbolizes jealousy. So symbolic codes denote something that they have only have something to do with because the culture says they do. Indexal signs indirectly point at a specific meaning. Iconic signs and codes, number 3 category. So symbolic codes, indexal codes, iconic signs and codes. These are the literal signs and codes. A cop means a cop. They are meant to appear like the thing itself. However, they always represent more than just the thing itself. When you see a cop, we also associate this with cultural ideas of justice or the law, or even masculinity or toughness. These codes also reinforce the ideas we have about these concepts in our culture. It reinforces the ideological meaning of those concepts. Okay, so iconic is something that represents that thing, represents a literal interpretation of that thing. It's not an indirect interpretation like index signs are. Indexal signs, is it indexal or am I making that word up? Indexal. Unlike indexal signs, which indirectly point to a certain meaning, iconic signs, it's literal sign. It's the thing that means the thing. It's a cop. A cop is a sign of a cop. And then, yes, they also represent everything that that cop indirectly represents, like justice, law, masculinity, or toughness. Nowadays, a lot of people would see a cop and they would relate the idea of corruption or something like that, So it changes with the culture. Those other connotations change with the culture. And then the fourth one is enigma codes. This is an important type of code used in film. It creates a question which the film text will then go on to answer. This is often used in trailers of movies as well as posters. They make people wonder, for example, who murdered the protagonist or how will they survive the apocalypse? They pique curiosity and intrigue in the viewers with the intention of making them go to see the movie. So enigma codes would be things you will seen a lot in marketing, right? I think foreshadowing could be a good example of an enigma code. I'm not for sure, but given what we just read, which we're not going to read too much deeper into it, but given what we just read, a foreshadowing what happens later in the movie could be a good example of an enigma code, right? So just wanted to break that down. 4 signs that you can see that they look for in movies: indexal signs, which are the indirect pointing towards a certain meaning; symbolic code, which is a code that seemingly represents something it only has, that it doesn't have anything to do with, but it does because the culture says it does. Iconic signs is the literal sign. A cop means a cop. A heart is just a heart. And then it can include all of the indexal signs with it. And then the enigma code. Enigma code is a code, a series. Remember, code is a series of signs that represent something, a question that needs to be answered, right? To cause intrigue, right? So that's good. And then we're going to get into conventions. Okay, that was another one that popped up on the list of important aspects, important signs and codes. This is another form of structure, right? These structures that we're trying to analyze in the system that is a movie. Binary opposition was a big one that we went over. Semiotics, or signs and codes. And genre conventions is another one. So genre conventions are elements, themes, topics, tropes, characters, situations, and plot beats that are common in specific genres. Genre conventions are what makes certain stories the genre that they are. Okay, think, in a horror movie, you're going to have scary music. That's a genre convention. In a horror movie, it's very common to see a monster or a ghost, paranormal. Those would be conventions of a horror genre. This is why conventions of a genre are made up of specific elements, as these are used to create and identify the genres in question. Okay, what are genre convention characteristics? Plot beats and narratives that narrative turns that almost always occur in a genre. Characters and settings that are staples of a genre. Think the bad guy in the horror movies, the monster or the ghost in the horror movies. The final girl is a very common character trope in horror movies. Tropes and themes that are almost always a part of the genre that they're being featured in, right? Okay, explaining genre conventions. And I think here, we're going to pop into that one. Yeah, that was a good one. Oh, yeah, definitely wanted to break that down. I did have a lot to break into on. This is going to be the last thing we really dive into on the stream. So I do want to read deeply into it because genre conventions are important to understand. Yeah, so explaining genre conventions. Genre conventions work best when you are working exclusively inside the genre you have chosen. This means no mixing or blending of other genres and just focusing on what works for the genre you have chosen. By the way, this website is Studio Binder. Studio Binder comes at you from the perspective of teaching somebody how to make movies. So it's talking to you from the perspective of you as a filmmaker, right? A fantasy story will have a dragon, a knight, a princess, a wizard, and more. A romance story will have a person in love with someone, along with a competing suitor for the protagonist's love, and usually a happy ending. Conventions of a genre do not have to be a checklist, but rather a group of themes and topics that make the genre what it is. For example, a romance story must always have a romance at its center. That's kind of a big one, right? Otherwise, it's not a romance. And if your romance does not end with the couple living happily ever after, you might alienate the very audience you were writing for. It is true that most people watch a romance movie to see two people fall in love, not fall out of love. But that doesn't mean that always happens, right? You know what I mean? I can't think of any right now, but there is romance movies out there that where it doesn't end with the couple having a happy ever after, or they do, but the happy ever after isn't with them together, right? Same if you write a Western that isn't set in the West, doesn't have a gunslinger, a showdown, or a sunset. You might upset some, if not all, Western fans. I'm sure you could lose the sunset, but definitely like a gunfight and a gunslinger and be set in the West, yeah. In many ways, genre conventions exist to give the people what they want. Dragons in fantasy, shootouts in westerns, monsters in horror, and so on. This is also why plenty of writers have made a living making stories in the same genre, as they know what their audiences want. It's like the old Greek comedies and tragedies. The genre alone should give you the gist of what you're about to read or watch. That said, plenty of movies set in specific genres have broke with convention in one way or another. Oh, very interesting. Yeah, okay. I was hoping you would add something there on the romance movie front, Cutie Pie, because you watch a lot of them, so you'd be a good one to talk about genre conventions in romance. A lot of shows and movies now end with the message of the person finding love within themselves. Yeah, I've noticed that too. I don't watch a lot of the romance, but I have at least seen from people bitching about it on the internet that this is a very common thing nowadays. And this almost kind of harkens back to that idea that we were speaking of the myth, right? How movies use specific codes and signs to build up an acceptance or a naturalization of that idea in a society. Right now, we are living in a time where we have the lowest rate of marriage and the lowest rate of childbirth in the history of this country. And all Western countries are experiencing this. It is interesting, just interesting. I'm not saying it's the cause, right? It's not the direct cause, but it is very interesting. In fact, I think it's a chicken and the egg kind of question. Are movies incorporating, are they throwing away the message of find love with someone else for the message of finding love within yourself? Because one, that is a convention that they're pushing on society. They're trying to naturalize this myth in society. Or are they, two, the other option, are they just doing it because they know a lot of their audience isn't finding love with other people? And most of us are just left with the choice of having to find love within ourselves. Is that why they're doing it, right? They're just trying to give what they think the audience wants, which is not a happy ending, because a lot of people aren't finding those happy endings anymore. You know, I imagine it's probably a combination of both. Realistically, the films are giving people what they want, but because people are saying this is what they want, films are then pushing, yes, this is what you want, right? It's a kind of a what is that? It is a positive or negative. This one I might be a negative, but a positive or a negative feedback loop, right? You know, so it's just interesting. That's kind of how movies use signs. And I don't necessarily consider it, you know, you can consider it propaganda, but it's not, you know, propaganda can be good. It can be bad. It have a good reason, a bad reason. I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but that's a very interesting thing you've noticed. And yeah, plays exactly into what we're talking about. So thanks for bringing that up. Cutie Pie for the win as always. Or it could be a message like RuPaul says, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else, right? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it could be a message like that. Like, I could see that. Again, that is a good message too. That one, I do think that's probably, you know, I don't know if anybody's pushing that in movies necessarily, if that's like a sign that's regularly brought up in movies, but I do like that version of the finding love with yourself. I think that one's a better variation, right? Because the point is, you know, it isn't just that, oh, all you need is yourself, because I think there is a lot of happiness to find in sharing life with other people. You know, I do believe that, but I definitely do believe that if you can't accept who you are, you're going to have a very hard time accepting other people. You know, I do believe that too. I think RuPaul throws that gauntlet down pretty good and fucking nails that shit. So anyways, yeah, good points though. Thanks for bringing those up. That's exactly what we're talking about here. And very good example of it too, Cutie Pie. So you're just killing it today, hot stuff. Jeez. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah. That said, plenty of movies in specific genres have broke with conventions in one way or another. Ah, look at that. Look at you. You're little fucking film theorist over here, right? Did you read ahead? Did you come into my computer room last night and read this shit? A tragic romance can still be a success, as can a Western set in a not-so-Western location. And of course, a horror story can be realistic so long as there are still victims to terrorize. So right there, a tragic romance can still be a success, right? I don't think the message of if you can't love yourself, you know, or finding love within yourself is necessarily a tragic message, but it is kind of what we're talking about, where it doesn't fall within that genre convention, right? So kind of crazy. It's a careful balancing act, but it can be done. Obeying and defying conventions. Oh, well, I guess that was like, to bring it back to that movie, Anora, the movie Anora that we watched, that was very much, or very, you could have taken the subtext from that movie. That's what the entire point of the movie was to subvert genre tropes and give you a more realistic idea of modern day romance, which is Prince Charming ends up being a dickhead. The hooker with a heart of gold is just a hooker. There's no heart of gold. And the happy ending doesn't ever come. The Russian mobsters are not really tough guys. You know, they're just people with jobs like everybody else. All those continuous conventions are all broken to give you what seems to some people to be a more realistic story. you know, or a story that mirrors their life closer, right? So take from that what you will, but obeying and defying conventions. Some classic and well-known movies have played genre conventions straight, while others have successfully defied them. Friday the 13th series as a whole has maintained horror genre conventions to the point of parody. Jason X is their example, and that's a good one. Jason X really does satirize, or it plays a parody off of the previous Friday the 13th movies. Scream is another parody on the slasher genre, right? It's a satirical parody on the slasher genre. Each film involves a killer coming after a group of youngsters, successfully killing off a lot of them before being defeated by someone, most often the final girl who has survived the killer's attacks. Yeah. Alien is a classic film that, while mostly horror, is set in outer space. So this is a common thing now. Nowadays, horror sci-fi is a very common genre nowadays. It's its own subgenre. But when Alien came out, it wasn't. That was one of many things Alien did that was pretty new and hadn't been quite done up to that point as of that moment in history. You know, there were still sci-fi horror movies out there. David Cronenberg had a few, you know, but Alien did it to peak level, right? Like anytime anybody makes a horror sci-fi movie, they're trying to be Alien nowadays, really. You know, 40 some years later, they're still just trying to be better than Alien. It set that high of a standard. So aside from the setting, its horror genre conventions are played completely straight. There's a group of people on an isolated freighter who are hunted down by an unknown and frightening monster. In the end, only one crew member remains, and it is up to them to take this monster out for good. Another movie that does this perfectly, it mixes not just sci-fi, but it mixes action with horror, is Predator. It's the exact same thing. A group of people is hunted down by a monster. That's the horror convention. But it does it in an action setting. Bunch of big, tough Rambos with guns and shit, right? That's your action movie setting, right? Same thing Alien does with sci-fi and horror. Predator does with action and horror, right? Pretty interesting. You can read our Alien script breakdown for more in-depth analysis. That's awesome. Crime films tend to follow a certain path that covers similar beats and end results. I fucking love me some good crime films. Many of these are either noir, neo-noir, or noir influenced, like Chinatown. One of the very best neo-noirs of all time, Chinatown, follows a detective investigating a mysterious murder. Like all crime stories, he follows clues before falling into serious danger himself, culminating in his discovery of who is behind it all. And since it's noir, the ending is usually a downer, even if the detective was able to solve the crime. Then you have Memento. Fucking love this movie. A noir-influenced crime movie, unlike any other. Yeah, this movie was like the first, again, like the Alien of noir movies, noir detective movies. Yeah, like crime spy, exactly. Horror and comedy, absolutely. Tons of, nowadays, that's a very common mix of genres, horror and comedy. And the other one, crime and spy. Yeah, tons of crime and spy. And yeah, spy comedy, all of that. You know, there's some good crime comedies. Absolutely. Those are combining those genres, right? Alien did that first, not first, but was the best to do it with sci-fi and horror. Predator is on that list of the best to do it with horror and action. And horror and comedy, you know, there's tons of them. I don't know what I would consider the best, but there's a lot of them out there, right? Ghostbusters was good at that. Kind of combined horror with comedy, right? Ghosts and jokes. So, Memento, a noir-influenced crime movie unlike any other. The protagonist suffers from memory loss, and there are two parallel storylines, one told chronologically, the other in reverse chronological order. A risky move, but it paid off for director Christopher Nolan, as it is considered one of his best films, along with having one of the best plot twists in recent memory. Memory, and it's about a guy without a memory. Yeah, that movie, I went over it in my plot structure stream, which I didn't end up posting on YouTube because it really sucked. It wasn't as structured as this stream was. This stream was dope. I had a lot of fun on this stream. My plot one, it just didn't jive very well. So I'm going to redo it this month. We're going to go over Memento, because Memento is one of the only movies that I can think of, the only story I can think of that enacted all three linear plots, forms of linear plots. It told the story in chronological order. It told the story in flashbacks or reverse chronological order. And then it even started the movie in media res, which is right in the middle of the movie. So, very interesting. Romance movies tend to be among the most conventional with their stories and plots, but some movies manage to shake things up. One of the best romantic comedies of all time is 500 Days of Summer, a rom-com that says outright it is not a love story. The film is told out of order as it follows our male lead and how he fell too hard for the titular Summer, how this expectation got the better of him, and how he eventually learned to move on. So there you go. That's a romance movie that's about learning to move on instead of, happy ending between the two. Then you have Edgar Wright's Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the definition of a movie that defies genre categorization. Video game references, musical fight scenes, and wild visual effects help make this movie into the cult sensation it is today. That said, the main plot is still very much a romance. Boy meets girl, boy has to fight for girl, boy loses girl, boy comes back stronger than ever for the girl, the boy and girl try again. These are just some examples of movies that obey or defy genre conventions in their own special ways. There's no shortage of scripts you can read online that follow the familiar path, go into totally different directions, or do something in between. So, there's your rundown of genre conventions, right? And it is important when you're watching a movie to have a list, just have a list handy. Now, if you're analyzing a movie, if you're just enjoying a movie, then just enjoy the movie, right? But if you're trying to analyze a movie, especially from a structuralist film theory aspect, because genre conventions are a part of the systems that structuralist film theory recognizes in movies that give it meaning. It's always worth having a list of genre conventions sitting next to you when you're watching a particular kind of movie, just to see how the movie either defies or obeys those particular conventions, right? So, but that's genre conventions. Now, we're probably going to be done for the stream today. I did about 2 hours and 40 minutes, and that's enough for me. I'm ready to go get some food and get a smoky toke and hang out and chill and work on other shit today. So I was going to read, if I had time, a structural film analysis of The Matrix. This is, I only read a couple paragraphs in it, not going to lie, but the paragraphs I read, this seemed like a really good film analysis. Really deep dives. I mean, it is a long, not super long, I guess, but it's a pretty long analysis of the movie The Matrix, and is a analysis of structuralism in The Matrix, right? So it's good for practice to read other people's analysis to see what they pick up on, right? That's a great way to practice your film theory, your film theory chops. So I recommend giving this a listen or read. I will put it in the description to the video alongside of Peter Geidel's Structural Film Anthology. This is a whole free book. I mean, it's 150 pages, so it's not a very long book, but it is a deep dive into filmmakers, a theory and definition of structuralist, materialist in film. It is a deep dive of specific filmmakers and specific aspects of structuralist film theory and filmmakers within the structuralist film theory framework. So go ahead and check that out for even further reading on structuralist film theory. And then this is another good book. There's no free copies of it, sorry, by Dudley Andrew, Concepts and Film Theory. This is another one that goes over some of the major film theories, right? So this is going to go over structuralism, auteur theory, semiotics right there, perception of psychological film theory, structuralism, semiotics, psychoanalysis, film theory, genre study. So those are all really good topics to jump into. I have this pulled up because in a Reddit thread, a whole bunch of people came at me and said, this is the very first book you should read on film theory, or it should be up there with some of the first books you read on film theory. So I will link that in the description to the video below. But that does it for us today on structuralist film theory. So we went over structuralism, the philosophy. We kind of have an understanding of it. I don't have a deep understanding of it, but it is what it is. We went over semiotics, the history behind those and where they came from. We learned what they mean to film. They just to recap that, it is the analysis of the structures in a system, in a film, and how those structures relate to each other to create meaning. And then we learned what those structures are, at least what some of them were, right? The semiotics of a film, right? Semiotic analysis, the analysis of the signs and codes within a film. And we went over a whole various different types of signs and codes within film, different types of codes, indexal codes, symbolic codes, enigma codes, and then there's another type of codes. And then we went over certain different types of signs that you could see in a movie, right? You had mise en scène type signs, sound signs from sound, signs from editing, and signs from camera shots. Yeah. Okay. So then we went over some examples for that too. And then, genre conventions and binary opposition, right? Are some really good key structures to look at in a movie to start your structural analysis journey. So that's it. That's what we had today. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. To anybody who's watching live, I really appreciate your support and hope you learned a lot. I know I did. I learned quite a bit from that. So I hope you did too. If you enjoy this film theory content, if you're watching this on YouTube, I hope you also enjoyed the content. And if you did, please leave a like and subscribe. That always helps the channel out. I really appreciate that. If you enjoy film theory content, you can check out my Ator theory video. You can check out, I got tons of film theory videos in my Film Buff Fridays playlist. So go check those out on my YouTube channel. The next time we talk about film on Cool Beans Hot Stuff will be next Friday. I get into my deep dive into angles. Angles is one of the eight elements of film theory. We already went over the first two. That was film type and camera shots. Now we're going to go into camera angles. That's next Friday. I don't stream on the weekends, so y'all have a wonderful weekend. If you want, I will be back here Monday at 11 a.m. for another Mental Health Monday. And next Monday, on Mental Health Monday, we're going to do the second half of my self-help book tier list. So I had 8 of my favorite self-help books I wanted to share with you. I shared the first 4, or numbers 8, 7, 6, and 5, on my first self-help book list stream. That's on my YouTube channel. Go ahead and check that out. Get yourself up to date. We're going to be finishing that list off, and I'll give you my numbers 4, 3, 2nd, and my number 1 pick for the best self-help book I've ever read. So we're going to be doing that Monday. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you for the support. I hope you learned a lot. And yeah, I will see you here in a couple of days. Have a wonderful weekend. Peace.